Tvam swaha tvam swadha tvam hi vashatkara swaratmika sudha tvam akshare nitye tridha matratmika stitha ardhamatra stitha nitya yanucharya visheshata tvameva satvam savitri tvam deva janani para यथाग्नेर्दहिका शक्ति रामकृष्णे स्थिता हिया सर्वविद्या स्वरूपां तां शारदां प्रणमाम्यं शारदं प्रणमाम्यं ओम शांति 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 हरि ओम तत्सत् गं गणेशाय नमः श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम Mother, you are verily Swaha, you are verily Swadha, you are Vashat, the mantras of consecration to gods and ancestors. You are verily the source of all sound, and you are embodied as all mantras. You are the very sound of Om in its threefold form, Ah, U, Ma, as well as the silence that is itself resonant with the taintless Vedic hymns. You are the mother of all the gods. You are the Sandhya. You are the Gayatri mantra and Savitri to whom that mantra is ascribed. You are the heat inseparable from the fire, the power by which mantras are able to have their effect. You are verily all the mantras, Sarva Vidya, and you are representing all the gods and goddesses who are none other than those patterns of vibration called mantras. To Sarada Devi we pray, may this be an offering at her lotus feet. Om, peace, peace, peace. Okay, so Tantra can be incredibly overwhelming, especially as a textual tradition when you come to it for the first time. But it's even more overwhelming the longer you stay in the game. Because the less you know, the simpler something is, and the deeper you go into it, sometimes the more nuance, the more subtlety you start to become aware of, and therefore the more overwhelmingly diverse and complex it becomes. So if I say the word Shiva, that word means so many different things to so many different groups, and that's good. Like each person should have their own relationship to their spiritual practice and to the goal of their spiritual practice. Each person should be able to conceive of that goal along their own predispositions. But the only way you can do that, the only way you can maturely articulate a sense of goal and means is if you're exposed to as many different ideas as possible so you can have the richest, most nuanced, and most appropriate articulation. So often the tyranny of no choices is bad and maybe even worse, but that doesn't mean the tyranny of many choices is that much better. So a lot of the work is just trying to figure out how to essentialize without losing the dizzying and dazzling diversity that you get in a tradition like Tantra. And that's just speaking about Tantra. Within the Tantric setting, there's so much going on, but the Tantric world is itself one galaxy within another solar system. It's one solar system within another galaxy of various other spiritual traditions that are non-Tantric, that maybe influence Tantra and have been influenced by Tantra, and that you also might want to engage in order to contextualize your study of Tantra. So this overwhelming canvas before you, filled with so much rich detail, it can put a lot of people off and it can draw a lot of people in, and we lose ourselves sometimes in all of this. And without precision, that is to say without discernment and without clarity, we might not, it's not that we're going to get into trouble. I don't think it's like that. There's no need to be superstitious here, and we don't have to create a sense of fear that isn't warranted. After all, you're never going to do any harm to yourself or to others trying to realize the absolute nature of reality. It can only do you good to think about God, even in some haphazard and maybe undiscerning way. Any kind of spiritual practice, whether practiced within the context of a tradition or outside of that tradition, or even if that practice is not properly understood or properly practiced, because it's practiced for the sake of attaining the absolute nature of reality, in which is the fulfillment of all your desires and in which all bliss can be attained and in which all suffering ceases, that's only going to do you good. It's not to say that any problems can arise from not understanding things, but I think it's much worse than that. It's not a lack of problems that we should be, it's not problems I think that we should fear. It's something deeper. We might miss out on the true beauty and the true value of something if we don't understand it for what it is. And the thing is, often we think we understand it, and we think that the horizon of our own knowledge is the horizon of all knowledge. And we think that what we have assumed about the word Shiva and about the word mantra and about the word tantra is what is meant by the word Shiva, mantra, tantra, and all the other words you're likely to encounter in the time that you spend in this world. And that's the tragedy. And so when we study primary sources, of course we bring this confirmation bias in with us, and we study those primary sources in light of what we already think about them. Like, our assumptions have already influenced the way we receive primary sources and work with the information therein. And it's very difficult to do anything about this. Like, obviously that's going to be there running in the background of your subconscious as you study anything. Yes, exactly. The map is not the territory. Red, it's good to see you. Yes. Today it was so funny. My friend sent me like this YouTube video of like people pushing chairs around, kind of like as an art project. It was called Poem to Chairs and Tables. And we were having a conversation around art and around Somananda and sentience and insentience and what it would be to write poems to tables and chairs and things. They of course themselves, tables and chairs, are words in the never-ending poem of Lord Shiva. But what do I think about this, she asked. And she sent me this. And she said the funniest thing about this video, it's like a modern art piece, like a performance art piece, was a comment that someone like had left there. It was like, Quelle merde, ce n'est pas beau art. And then he was like, Je te demande, like something like you should read Kant or something. Like, so it was so funny because like it's always Kant. We always say like you should, when it comes to Western philosophy, it's like categorical imperative. And once I went to a show in the Hammer, and the whole show, I think, was premised upon the fact that the artist was locked up in a New York apartment for like a year or something, doing nothing but reading Kant. Yeah, va lire Kant. And he was like, Je veux demander. He was like, you better read Kant. And then we can talk about Buzak, you know, like this is not Buzak, like this doesn't qualify as art. It's just people pushing chairs around because it didn't have maybe some kind of philosophical value. And that's a good point. That's why, quelle merde, what shit. And Kant is difficult to read, you know, and so there was like one exhibit that I went to, and the whole thing was just based on the fact that this person had spent a year alone in their apartment reading Kant. And I'm like, how beautiful though, to go deep into a single text. And that's what is exciting about Tantra. You get a rich and diverse textual history. And sometimes, if you try to study all the texts, you're never really going to be able to like really understand any of the texts. Because each text requires lifetime, if not lifetimes, of contemplation, study, and immersion. So in the traditional setting, in the classical context, your guru might not have had all the text. Probably your guru has one text or a few texts. Maybe that guru might not even have their own texts. Like, it's just texts that they have gotten from their gurus who have inherited them from their gurus before, and they might have spent their whole life just studying that one text, having never themselves produced any work around it. Now, the work of the guru is to transmit that text, not necessarily as a text, but as knowledge. So very often people would copy the text, transcribe it, maybe even transpose it into other local languages or write commentaries around it. But sometimes that wasn't necessary. The students would just sit around, usually a very small group, and they would go verse by verse through the text, and they would take their time, kind of like how we do on Thursdays with our Puja Padati and with the Vijnana Bhairava, and how we do on Fridays with the Paramartha Sara, and most recently with this Mahartha Manjari. You know, and you can take any text and you can go deep into it by studying it slowly, verse by verse, and allowing those verses to come alive within you. That's why the Upanishads, Mandukya Upanishad is the shortest of them all, and it makes sense to start with that one, except the fact that it's the shortest doesn't necessarily make it introductory, because it's also a very subtle and powerful Upanishad, and it's devoid of all those like fantastical, like narrative elements that you might find in other Upanishads that might make it a slightly drier read and a more difficult thing to engage with. That being said, we very rarely study the Mandukya Upanishad with just those 12 verses. We take those 12 verses with Gaudapada's 280 something verses, commenting upon those 12 verses, and then you might also take Shankara's commentary, which comments upon what Gaudapada had to say about those 12 verses, and then you take Anandagiri, who is commenting upon Shankara. So have you really studied the Mandukya? You know, it's like, do you even lift, bro? It's kind of like, have you even studied the Mandukya if you haven't studied Gaudapada, or if you haven't studied Shankara on Gaudapada, or Anandagiri on Shankara? And like, it's important to note that these things develop with time. So the understanding that we had with the 12 verses of the Mandukya maybe needs to be re-explained in Gaudapada's context in the 2nd and 3rd century AD. That's a very different time from when the Mandukya was maybe first taught to people. So the commentary is important to like recontextualize it, reinterpret it, but of course not change it. The 12 verses are kept, but then they're interpreted. And then Gaudapada he has to say what he has to say given his cultural period. But then Shankara, who comes after him, Shankara is the disciple of Gaudapada's disciple, at least 100 or 200 years have passed. Oh, actually, no, much more. It's like the 8th century now. So it's like 600 years have passed. Wouldn't it be important now for Shankara to explain what Gaudapada said? Because arguably what Gaudapada said has become arcane in the context of Shankara's time. And then having explained it, Shankara now like is content, he's done his job. And then his student, Anandagiri or some other master will come and comment upon the text again as per their time. So this is a living textual tradition. So if you have any text, it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and more nuanced with time. So not only are you studying a text, you have to also be sensitive to the historical and cultural movements that are contextualizing the way that text is received, understood, and transmitted. So a lot of times you find people presenting spirituality the way they heard it, but a lot of that won't really work in the modern day because they were spoken to people who lived in a very different context, and we just retain what was said without understanding anything about that context. That's very dangerous because then you'll just like parrot back these words and either might not mean anything or they'll be very difficult or impractical to apply. So how do you like engage with a tradition that is not only so textually rich, but whose texts are themselves so deep because they come with commentary upon commentary upon commentary upon commentary as the ideas project and progress through literal thousands of years of history? That's the work. It's a historical, cultural, sociological study of thousands and thousands of years of like the progression of an idea, but it's also like a scriptural study, an academic work of looking at various resources and then making some sense of the philosophical, soteriological, metaphysical, and theological claims that are made and that are changed and revised and represented across all of these traditions. It's monumental, it's profound. And just thinking about all of this itself has the effect of expanding the mind. You just get this sense of Vata, Mercurial, Gemini delight, if I could put it anyway. Now, yesterday was the new moon. It was a new moon in Gemini, which is quite fun because Gemini is fun and playful, but of course it's the air sign in the tropical system, and its rulership is Mercury, Hermes, which requires which gives the gift of flexibility, and that's required for play. For humor, you have to be quick and witty, and like humor and flexibility, that's a very mercurial trait. But the flexibility of the Mercury mind, you could say, is to be able to see things from different points of view. To see things and say, this is the only way to look at it. Mercury arguably saves you from that. Like the energy of this Buddha, and you could say Brihaspati. Brihaspati can expand, Briha means to expand, but there's no point expanding if you can't keep track of that expansion. So when you come to Tantra and you encounter any text, very quickly the thing will explode. It will expand. Like even in this lecture, probably in the last 10 minutes you might have already started to feel that. Like I started very simply and slowly I'm picking up speed and the things are just expanding, and that's Brihaspati. But what you need arguably is Buddha, the ability to quickly and nimbly and fluidly and with great mercurial play and lightness and joy keep track of all of these various things to understand that nuclear explosion of information. So yesterday was a new moon in Gemini, and new moons, as you know, are very sacred to Mother Kali, but also just like across cultures all around the world, I think symbolically, it's universally understood that like the new moon is a time of beginnings. The new moon is when an emptiness slowly starts to fill up. And so we could say, if we're going to start at ground zero, today being Pratipada, the first day of the new moon, what would be like a good foundation to start entering into Tantra? Not necessarily textually, nor even like theologically or metaphysically or even like spiritually, just mechanically. Like what would you need to know before you even started engaging with those texts? And we thought quite obviously just the Sanskrit language. Like obviously all of these texts, if not most of them, if not all of them, at least most of them, they're transmitted throughout history in Sanskrit. And so some Sanskrit fluency would be very helpful in engaging with these primary sources. Some of them have been translated, but even then, if you read the translation, you'll get a flavor for the text perhaps, but all translation is interpretation. And so you can't really access what the text is saying just through a translator, because that translator is also going to be projecting their idiosyncrasies and their understanding. So they're going to read it in light of their tradition. And if you don't know much about the translator, you might be tempted to believe that what they're saying about the text is what the text says. But very rarely is that the case. The way a translator understands a Sanskrit word is going to be very different from translator to translator, and that is the glory and power of the Sanskrit language. The thing about Sanskrit words is that they're often compounds, and the way you break up that compound can change the understanding of what that compound means. And there are different ways to do sandhi, meaning to understand what words make up a compound. And not only that, when you take a word, even a single word, like an element, without thinking of it in terms of its compound, that word can further be broken up into phonemes. And those phonemes have deep value to us in the Tantric tradition. But even before we start talking about phonemes, there's something called dhatu, which means root. So the word asana, as you know, has the root of asi, the dhatu, asi. Or the word deva, that root div, means up to like 6 things. So you could say it means playful, krida, or it means light, or it means glory or power, like prabhu, like prabhava, like that. So how do you understand the word God if you don't have access to the dhatu, div, which has 6 different meanings? Are they all 6 meanings at the same time? Sometimes it's not so easy, because the word yoga, for instance, one of the oldest dhatus in the Sanskrit language, it is such a diverse list of meanings that it can be applied in so many different contexts. Like this is a yoga in the sense that I'm talking and you're listening and there's a connection between us. So yoga could mean any kind of connection. So then you can apply it to conjuncts in an astrological sense. When one planet is in conjunct with another planet, then maybe they exalt one another, they bring out each other's powers, and that can be seen as a yoga. Or even like the sexual act is called a yamala, but that yamala can be seen as yukti or yoga. The word yoga can mean a state that you attain as a result of your spiritual practice, union with the divine. Like a Shiva yogi is not necessarily a person who practices Shaivism. A Shiva yogi might be one who is connected to Shiva. So Shiva yogi can mean siddha, fully realized being. Or it could mean the means, the connection, the artha, or I should say the sambandha, the link between the practice and the goal. Or link between you and Shiva. So if I'm a Jiva and Shiva is Shiva, a Shiva yogi is one who's connected to Shiva. What's the connection though between me and Shiva? Yoga. You could say the path between me and Shiva, the path of Kundalini Shakti, Yoga Marga it's sometimes called, that Shushumna Nadi, that can be called yoga itself. So yoga could be just the space between me and my goal, as well as any means that I can find to fill that space or traverse that space. So often when we use the word yoga, we use it in the context of yuj, the root meaning use. You know, just like the English word use, it's very much like the Sanskrit root yuj. And so yoga is anything that you might use. And therefore, like, is its application only spiritual? Maybe not. Maybe your yoga is not necessarily something that you have spiritual use for. Maybe it's also something that could be useful in any other context, however mundane or secular that context might appear. So then how do you understand the word yoga? It's not just a state, nor is it just a means. It's not just something that can be used across different contexts. It's also itself a school. It's a school of thought. And you might be practicing yoga, but you might not at all subscribe to the philosophy, the theology, the soteriology, or even the epistemology of the yoga tradition, which is based on the Sankhya tradition with some nuances. So then, if you take a single word like yoga, and you break it down to its root, yuj, you can understand why it's such a multivalent word, because the root itself is so fluid and so flexible. And that's the thing that Bhairav Ananda and I are struggling to convey. Anybody can put a list of texts on a piece of paper. Anybody can teach Sanskrit in terms of grammar, like Vyakarana. You know, like if you wanted to learn Sanskrit, maybe you would start by making flashcards. Flashcards of all the sounds in the Sanskrit language. But then I will immediately say, yes, but don't forget, the Devanagari script is not the only way to write and present Sanskrit. So you might make all of your flashcards, you might understand that looks like this, or ka looks like that, or ja looks like this, and you might think, now I know, if I see this ja, it's going to be ja. Except what happens when you're reading the Malini Vijaya Uttara Tantra, and you look at it, you're like, this is not what I learned. Because it's not in Devanagari, it's in Sarada. And the fact that like Sanskrit can be presented in a different script is something worth taking note of. And you know, in the English language, and like in French, and in many of the languages of the world, you can just use the Phoenician alphabet, I think it's called, like the Roman alphabet, like A, B, C, D, E, as understood like by that Roman culture. That's we usually use that. And in Sanskrit, that's not the only, like there are many scripts, you know, to write something. So therefore, like, is that the way you start studying Sanskrit? Maybe, but it's very limiting. It's a very limited way to understand Sanskrit. Because you might, and haven't you all thought this, like at some point, that Sanskrit just looks like this? That if I just learn e, like this, that's Sanskrit? It's deeper though, right? Because there's Sarada script, there's Granthi script. When I first started studying when I was a child, a lot of the Sanskrit texts that I saw were in Tamil script. That's important to note, that it's not a language with a script. It's a system of sounds. It's a meta language which can be rendered into script, and the script that we choose has, as I said last week, orthological and morphological significance. So the way a symbol appears on paper is very intentional, and what that symbol is conveying is very deep. So if you just learn Sanskrit like this with flashcards, I'm not saying you don't do that. Obviously that's a wonderful way to get started, but it's sometimes missing the nuance of what you're doing. So don't a lot of people do this? They like study Sanskrit, they get their flashcards, they understand how to sight read Sanskrit. Wonderful. Then they like memorize the Sanskrit syllabary. So you could say e, a, I, o, ow, ang, ah, and then ka, ka, ga, ga, nga. You learn how to say all the sounds, which is all wonderful, and how to arrange all the sounds. And you might go so far as to learn how to say it from all the way through to ha or ksha, and then from ksha all the way back to So you might be able to go back and forth because you have the whole thing memorized. That's also wonderful. But just having it memorized does not at all imply that you understand why it's arranged that way, which is a revelation in and of itself. There's like a deep, deep significance to why the sounds are arranged the way they're arranged. But then once you start to get the hang of this and you think, oh, this is how like alphabets are arranged, in comes Malini. And it shows you a wholly different order of arranging alphabets. So you have na, and that goes all the way through to pa. Where before you had and that went all the way through to ha or ksha. Now that level of nuance and complexity will also delight you, but also maybe frighten you, because the moment you study something and think you have it, it's pulled out from under you and the thing becomes much more complicated and beautiful, I think, and nuanced and meaningful. So it's almost like we inherited something from like an Atlantean civilization, like some Satya Yuga way of thinking that Bhairav Anand and I are not only ourselves really struggling to understand, but we are really struggling to teach it. You know, we're really struggling to teach it because we can, like, you know, we've taught so many Sanskrit classes and they've improved people's Sanskrit fluency and literacy, but not their understanding. That's what's like really frustrating about all of this. Like as we watch closely and, you know, ask people and talk to them and see where they are in their sadhana and their understanding, it's like they're saying the right words sometimes and sometimes not even that, but they're maybe not understanding the whole, or they're not feeling past the concepts to some deeper structure. And it's that structure that we're trying to articulate and communicate that might come naturally to someone who is immersed in that way of thinking and who inherits a language while already having that way of thinking, or whose language is an expression of that way of thinking or that way of being, but it might be very difficult to transmit to someone who maybe doesn't have that background. So that's the task, and it's complicated and confusing. So now when you have the list of Sanskrit alphabets, or the way the alphabets are arranged, Malini will have an effect, Matrika will have an effect, and they have different ritual applications when it comes to the tantric context. Understanding Matrika is maybe prior to understanding Malini. Malini is a bit more esoteric. Matrika means the way we list alphabets in the mainstream. So all the way through ha or ksha. That's considered to be masculine. And Malini is the feminine. The only difference really is that in Matrika, the vowels are separated from the consonants. And in Malini, the vowels are mixed into the consonants. So it's all a little bit more sangam or yamalam. It's a bit more like mixed up, a bit more integrated. And that can change everything about your ritual and everything that you understand about your philosophy, if indeed your philosophy is mapped onto the Matrikas like we explained last week. So, okay, if you want to access Tantra, you realize that most of the texts are in Sanskrit, and to access the primary sources and the secondary sources that explain them, it might be valuable to learn some Sanskrit. So then you might start with a Sankalpa. Like today is the first day of the new moon, Pratipada, it's the start of a cycle. It is Gemini season, so there's a lot of Vata energy in the air. Maybe I'll start learning Sanskrit. Then you pick up... let's see, what's a good... The Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit. That's a great book for self-study. So you pick up Professor Antonia Ruppel's book. Actually, I know her. She's wonderful and very sweet and exactly like you would expect her to be. A very soft-spoken, eccentric, German accented lady with a deep intellectual acumen, like Athena embodied. And she's a wonderful teacher of Sanskrit. And so her book, Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit, that's great. It will introduce you to first principles and it'll give you a wonderful like self-study course. But Anandji and I are like a bit frustrated, not with any of the Sanskrit materials available, but with the idea that Sanskrit is just something to study like a language. It's not. It's a sadhana in and of itself, and it's a way of being. And sometimes you don't just get that from studying it. And so what would it take to get that? You know, what will present Sanskrit with a deeper understanding, a more integrative understanding? That's what we're puzzling over right now. Okay, so let's say we learn the alphabet, and then we learn that the scripts are diverse. It's not just... Devanagari, it's also Sarada, it's also Granthi, it can also be presented in Tamil and in English script. You have IAST now, a transliteration standard, where when we write Sanskrit words in English, you can draw a line over an A, or you can put a dot under an N, or you could add a symbol to the S that would change the way that S is sounded. There are all these ways in which you can make the Roman or the Phoenician alphabet sound out the Sanskrit words in Sarada or in Devanagari or in Granthi or in any of these other scripts. And that's wonderful. But even that sometimes people struggle with. Like the ability to read IAST reliably requires that you learn a new set of symbols. So it can be like learning a new script actually. It is actually in effect learning a new script. Like learning accents and the way accents change the sounding of a word, even in English, that itself requires a lot of learning. So maybe we don't start with Devanagari or with like Sanskrit, but we start with the IAST system, and we just start by learning how to pronounce the various sounds as transliterated by IAST. And a lot of times when you like pick up a, I don't know, like a commentary or like a translation of the Upanishads, or like Gita, Bhagavad Gita or something like that, at the beginning of the book, there's probably going to be a list of Sanskrit sounds, and they're going to maybe show you the transliteration scheme and give you examples as to how to say the various words. So you'll see like e, and They'll say it's like as in father. So it's not a, it's right? Like, so like if you see a word like Bhairava, I don't know, let me think of a word like, okay, Ananda. The word Ananda, if you sounded out the A like you would in the like maybe American English system, it'd become like Ananda, right? Ananda. But that changes the whole mantric frequency. So Ananda might convey meaning, but it doesn't demonstrate phonemic or mantric understanding. Like the power of the word might still work, but because we move the sounds, it might work in a way that we didn't intend. So the sounds are very intentional for very intended effects, and therefore to sound them out correctly is very important. So knowing what the slash above the first A does to the word is very important. So it wouldn't be Ananda, it would be Ananda, right? Ananda. But the if you don't understand that it sounds like UH, that can be a problem. So even if the A appears, it won't sound necessarily like that A in other languages and in other scripts. So in the beginning of any text, whether Upanishads or Gita, the new standard now is in the publication world, it's like they put a kind of guide to pronunciation. And then we sometimes like skim it and we're like, okay, whatever, and then we just like read the rest of the text. But these guides might not be very helpful either, because there are limitations to how much you can express the way a word sounds on paper without sounding it out yourself to give someone an example. So a very good thing to do would be to go on YouTube and like find like an example of somebody just pronouncing all the letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. E, or like especially with the aspirated sounds, which I will also struggle with. Being a Tamil speaker, we don't have aspirated sounds in our languages. So if it's like ka, how is that different from ka? You know, ka, like da and dha. So dharma, the word dharma is an aspirated H. And then what about the retroflex sounds like da, dha, na? Those are going to be quite difficult because those sounds typically we don't make in English. In fact, the only time you would want to make those sounds is when somebody is voice acting Apu from The Simpsons and needs to like make a caricature of how Indians sound. So you just put your tongue in the middle of your mouth, and it's actually kind of a interesting insight because Indian languages do have a lot of the sounds. So if you want to imitate an Indian accent, you would just speak like this, right? Like it's just kind of like how the Indian languages tend to sound to Westerners who are picking up maybe mostly on the discrepancies, the things that sound different from what they know. So that's going to be hard to learn, especially with the word Hatha Yoga or Katta Upanishad, to learn how to sound out Hatha or Katta or Attahasa, that Attahasa sound, that has meaning. And it will matter because not only does it have meaning in the context of ritual, where these things are mantras whose sounds are supposed to like reorganize reality in a certain way, but it will have meaning in terms of philosophy, because understanding dentals and differentiating them from retroflex sounds can be systematically or conceptually important if indeed you're going to make philosophical claims using language, which is what we were doing last week and what we'll review this week. So it's not enough maybe just to be familiar with the words and the way that they sound. It's also important to understand why those sounds are arranged the way they are arranged. And so there's a prior understanding to the language that makes us interact with the language not as a language, but maybe as a meta-language. I maybe can go further here. Not even as a meta-language, but as a system of sounds. And so I think the first thing I want to like articulate before we begin today, all of this is just me like prefacing our conversation, is that we should not think of Sanskrit as a system, as a language that's culturally specific, because India is full of languages, they're called Prakrits. But Sanskrit is like a meta language that not only influences all of those languages, but explains how language works everywhere. And so when we ask, can we say a mantra in English? Of course we can, because mantra is not necessarily in Sanskrit, but Sanskrit is the system of sounds that explains how you would use English in a mantric way. So therefore, when I'm talking about learning Sanskrit, like some people get upset about this and they're like, oh, this is kind of like elitist. Like not everybody will have access to Sanskrit education the way that, like, say, Bhairavanandaji did, having grown up in the context of being like a Sringeri Mata Brahmin, you know, like it's not necessarily the case that people have access to Sanskrit. So then if you tell people that they have to learn Sanskrit, maybe they're not going to like that. It'll sound elitist, like we're like locking them out or something like that. What, I have to learn a language to talk to God? I'm so sorry to have to say this, but yeah, dude, if you want to learn about God, you have to learn about like the principles of reality, as it were. And reality, as understood by this tradition, is sound. The word that was with God, the word that was God, that logos, this logos idea is central because you'll see the whole Vedic world is premised upon God as logos, God as word or God as sound. The whole world is not different from God. So if God is word and the world is God's vak, his word, or her vach, her speech, which is constantly unfolding itself in each and every moment, then to understand word, to understand speech, and to understand God as not only the speaker, but as speech itself becomes essential. So then a system of language is more than just a way to communicate things. It's a way to communicate with reality. It's a way to communicate with God. And it's a way, more importantly, to communicate what reality and what God is. And that's a very subtle and profound thing to try to do. So yeah, we have to learn Sanskrit. But no, you don't have to learn Sanskrit. You know, like there's not necessarily like that much you can gain from just studying it the way that people study it, where you learn grammar and you learn vibhaktis, the endings of certain words. So if a word ends with like an A sound, like Shive, Durge, then we know, oh, it's the vocative. So now we're saying, oh Shiva, oh Durga. Or if a word is like Namastasye, then the Namastasye would be in relation to like Kali or something. So Kalikaye Devye Namaha, salutations to the goddess, like that. So endings are important. You can Dakshinam, Bikam, or you've encountered so many of them already. Gyatva, having known. Labdva, having attained. Dhyayet, one should meditate. Like you've learned all these endings, and the endings will change the way we interact with the word. So when I want to meditate, when I want to instruct someone to meditate, you could say one should meditate. Dhyayet. And when you're looking at Tantra, a primary source, the ending will clue you into the meaning of the word. And cool, you can learn all this stuff. They're called vibhaktis. And when you learn the vibhaktis and you expand your vocabulary, having learned all these various grammar rules, then you can look at a Tantra, most likely in Devanagari. You can sight read it without needing transliteration, which might help you access the sounds more directly. And having sight read it, you can then understand what it's saying. That's wonderful, but not enough. Because having understood what it's saying, do you really understand all the other implications of what it could be saying? And so even if someone were to like learn the syllabary, the phonemes, and even if they were then to learn how to like sight read those phonemes and pronounce them correctly, even if they were then to learn Vyakarana, grammar, and even if they were then to access primary sources in a way that they could meaningfully study those sources in order to understand what those sources are saying, it still wouldn't be enough because those sources are culturally and historically conditioned. So you would have to also have access to all the other cultural and philosophical forces that were working on that text at the time, which inform why what is being said is being said. So you have to take things in context. But we don't have that context because of a lack of historical understanding. Now that's going to be complicated too. So not only do you need to study Sanskrit, but you need to also study history. And it takes a certain kind of mind to study history because you have to understand and maybe even love people. Like the only point of studying history, world events, is because maybe you care about how people lived in different times, and you like to see how what you think about and feel is very much like how someone else lived and thought and felt back in 10th century Kashmir. That's an exciting project, to realize that we're not so different from the people in the past, and then to also see in all the ways we are different, and then we appreciate the historical progression of ideas better because of that. Right? So we have this concept of history and this concept of mystical linguistic study, so linguistic mysticism, and this concept of literally vocabulary and grammar and syntax and even scripts. These are all moving pieces, right? Then there's one more thing after this. When we enter into the text, even if we had access to the historical context, even if we could sight read, even if we could understand the meaning of the words that we're reading because of our understanding of grammar, even then, it does not guarantee that we're sensitive to the flexibility of that meaning. That's why like Mercury and Gemini, that's very important because there's a certain flexibility and playfulness and lightness that these things imply. So these words are held very lightly, like a bouquet of flowers. Maharta, Manjari. The meaning is not like concrete and objective and inflexible. It's something that is so fluid and dynamic and permissive of change, recontextualization, reinterpretation. That's the beauty of the Sanskrit language. To teach that, I think, is the most essential thing. And that's what Vivekananda and Sri Ramakrishna are mostly representing. They're representing the ability to see how many different views can all be valid ways of looking at the one thing. Sri Ramakrishna was born on a Wednesday, and Wednesday is attributed to Buddha. And you can see that perhaps has never been more mercurial a being than Ramakrishna, because he's playful, he likes to play pranks, he's a great singer. You know, the Mercury Gemini thing, it's often been associated to like arts and like expression and creativity with a childlike sort of playful sense. But he also was a real talker, right? This guy would talk, he would sing and dance, but he would also talk all day and he would talk all night. And Vivekananda, his foremost disciple, would spend his life just lecturing and lecturing and lecturing and communicating. They were such profound communicators, and they were communicating on a level unprecedented prior to them. Not just the Sangha that was immediately around them, but post Vivekananda, these ideas were broadcast all over the world. As Swamiji once said in a letter to a friend, he put these ideas he means to put these ideas into the machine called colonization and leverage that machine to broadcast these ideas all over the world. But what idea? The main idea, the essential idea, the most important thing to convey is this flexibility of mind. But I've heard so many people assent intellectually to this idea. They come to the Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition, and one of the most fascinating things about the Ramakrishna Vivekananda temples is you'll see pictures of Buddha and the Christ alongside one another with Ramakrishna and Holy Mother and Vivekananda, and you'll hear that all religions are true and all paths work. Like, that's so ennobling, especially if your whole life you've been in a religious context where you're told this is the only thing, our way or the highway. And not even the highway, that doesn't even exist. It's just our way. We are the truth, the life, we are the way. And you've heard this your whole life, and something within you rebels in this postmodernist, relativist new world to the idea that any one thing could be the only thing. So when you come to the Ramakrishna mission, or when you come to Hinduism at all, its diversity and flexibility, its inclusiveness is the first thing that's going to inspire you, right? But just because you're inspired by it, that's a good thing. It's a wonderful thing to be inspired by diversity and flexibility and the way that we can be inclusive. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have learned to be flexible or dynamic or inclusive. Because I know so many people who come to the Ramakrishna tradition and who start by being attracted to this idea, being inspired by this idea, and not only intellectually ascending to this idea, but also propagating this idea. You'll hear these people parrot, like Minas, these words, all paths lead to the same goal. Again, that's a very under-nuanced way of putting it, because if all paths lead to the same goal, that's flattening. We've talked about Ramakrishna and the hermeneutics around Ramakrishna before, and it's a very subtle thing, because is Ramakrishna saying that all religions are valid paths in that they will all give you the same outcome? Absolutely not. The absolute nature of reality is so diverse in its approach because it's so diverse in its experience. So all the different religions won't necessarily give you the same experience of God, but they will give you an experience of God. So the paths are different, and the realization of each path is also different, but that doesn't mean God or the absolute is different. That's one nuance there. So some people think it's like the top of a mountain, and everybody starts going up the mountain at different points, so they have all these different routes, and they get to the top of the mountain, they all meet there, and they're like, oh my god, we were all right. Not quite. It might be more like a mountain range, where some people go up a different mountain, you go up a different mountain, you're all at the same height, but your range, your peak looks very different from someone else's peak. And then from your peak, you might say, my peak is better, and from that peak, they'll say, no, my peak is better. Very rarely do people on the peak say this, but sometimes they do. But if you can peek over to the other peak, you can see that person is just as happy as you are over here, and both of you, because you're so happy, won't really have any reason to find fault with one another. But that doesn't change that the way your life looks and the way your experience of God is fundamentally and categorically different from the way their life looks and the way their experience of God is expressing itself or feels to them. So that's a nuance, right? And not only that, you can also ask, is this like all paths in the sense that, like, what about problematic things? Like, what about like a religion who is premised upon like killing people or something like that? What about newfangled religions that might have more to do with consumer capitalism? Like, what exactly constitutes a path? That's another question we have to ask. If all paths work, what is it to walk a path? What is a path? And we don't like to ask that question. So notice, even the claim that all religions are true and that all paths lead to God, like even that claim can be intellectually assented to, it can be expressed, it can be proposed vehemently even. Some people can be fanatical even about this, but it might not even necessarily then imply that you understand it or that you can think like it. You know, so the Ramakrishna way of thinking is more than just intellectually assenting to a Mahavakya like Jotamot Totopot or something like that. You know? So that's the problem. How do you convey this flexibility, inclusiveness, and mercurial quality that Ramakrishna and Vivekananda embodied effortlessly? Because I myself have met people like this, and they've had tremendous difficulty trying to understand Ramakrishna in the way that I'm presenting Ramakrishna. In fact, they don't even think that Ramakrishna can be presented in any other way than the way that they were first exposed to him. Do you know what I mean? Like, alternative interpretations of Ramakrishna might be very difficult for people who love Ramakrishna to hear, even though the thing they might love most about Ramakrishna is his diversity. Haven't you seen this on the internet? Like, people freak out when there's anybody outside of Belur Math talking about Ramakrishna. But that's only because they haven't visited Belur Math. Because if they do, in Belur Math itself, every sadhu of Belur Math will have their own Ramakrishna to share with you. More or less, it will all kind of match the institutional stance. But if you've met Ramakrishna sadhus, you might immediately get the impression that they're incredibly diverse, highly variable. They're not all trained to be the same. And even the clothes that they wear are sometimes different. Some wear hats, some don't. It's not standardized. Some have orange, like bright orange robes. Orange is also the color of Mercury, mind you. They have bright orange robes. Others, their robes are more pink, and some of them won't even wear their robes. Like when Prabhavanandaji first came to this country, like many of the first generation sadhus, the second generation sadhus, after Ramakrishna, that is, Ramakrishna, like, the first generation means direct disciples of Ramakrishna. Second generation means disciples of the first disciples of Ramakrishna. So when first disciples like Trigunatita Nandaji and of course Vivekananda, when they came to America, they didn't wear the ochre robes of the Swami. Back home they would have worn that maybe, but they wore different things. Like Swamiji had his own outfit that a Maharaja had tailored for him. It was like a wine red sort of smock, and it was very regal and very beautiful, and he used to carry turbans and sashes around with him in a suitcase, and he always insisted upon wearing a turban and putting the sash around his waist. That was his fashion sense. Trigunatita Nandaji, another direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, when he came to San Francisco, he had his own way of dressing. Swami Abhedanandaji also dressed in kind of a modern Western fashion. Like, these are all people who wore what they wanted, and they were told by Holy Mother even to adjust to the climes and times and rhythms of whatever place they were in. That's the flexibility that you find with Ramakrishna sadhus. So even when we're talking about Gerua, and not all of them wear Gerua, the traditional garb of the sannyasin, it's different colors of Gerua and different styles of Gerua with shawls and with hats and everything. The fact that they're all dressed differently is important. In some traditions, they're all dressed the same. Haven't you noticed? They're like absolutely all dressed in the exact same way, and they're trained to think in the exact same way, and if they don't think in that way, they're either made to think in that way or exiled from the community. That's why we have things like the Nicene Creed to decide what is kosher and what's not kosher within Christianity. And if you're someone like Marcion, and you think the New Testament God is a God of love and light, and distinct from the Old Testament God, a God of rules and regulations and punishment, then you're like, okay, not Christian enough, because that's not what the rest of us think. And the fact that you have a different view of the tradition, that's not okay, bro. Like, you have to dress the same way, and talk the same way, and express yourself the same way, and realize God the same way as us. Because you don't, your diversity is a problem, fuck off, right? So Marcion is then deemed to be a heretic. So all these people like Maximus the Confessor, Evagrius of Pontius, these are all like almost gladiator names. All these early Christian thinkers in the first 300 years of Christianity, there was so much debate as to whether or not they thought like the mainstream Catholic Church. And if they didn't, bye-bye. And they were like deemed not only heretics but blasphemers, and often their view of God, that God was called like Satan or something, and their followers demonized as apostates. Apostates literally demonized as apostates. And God is literally demonized in this sense, because then you say whatever you say is God, if it's not what I say is God, then your God must be Satan and opposed. So that's an interesting thing we find in Christianity. And of course, a lot of the people that I'm speaking to, whether in America or in the UK, like that's their basic background. Like, even if they didn't grow up in a religious family, they're probably exposed to the general sense of Protestant or Catholic ethos, like a general sense of Christianity, and the sense that like if somebody disagrees, we must figure out who is right and who is wrong, as if to imply that there is an objective right or an objective wrong. And that's kind of how we approach Sanskrit. So in the Western mind, and I won't say Western, it's all over the world, because look at what happens in India now too, where like they don't seem to understand. Because what they're trying to understand is subtler than just learning Sanskrit, subtler than just learning how to do puja, subtler than just being able to say the right words. You have to understand something which Ananda Vartana might call dhvani, suggestion or implication or deeper meaning. And I'm not sure that dhvani is being conveyed. And therefore, we're kind of pulling at our hair a little bit, trying to figure out how to articulate that dhvani. How many different ways can we approach this? So, yeah, right, there's art, there's poetry. But then let's talk about the intellect, the role of the intellect here. Because Swami Vivekananda, Sri Ramakrishna, They were highly aesthetically evolved beings, and so they were singing and they were writing poems, and their oratory itself was an art form. There was an art to the way that they gave their presentations. Sri Ramakrishna was a master of storytelling, of allegory, of parable, and he could convey profound spiritual truths like Jesus through parables. And Swami Vivekananda was a very sharp and refined philosophical mind who could hold in his mind so many different ideas and systematize it in a way that's clean and clear and understandable. Swamiji even once said, I want to make it so that a 5-year-old should be able to understand all this stuff. He wants to simplify it so much that it doesn't lose any of its nuance and subtlety and beauty, but it becomes so like concise that even a 5-year-old should be able to understand this stuff, right? And the way he said it was so beautiful. He's like, I mean to offer dry hard facts, or dry hard jnana, softened in the syrup of bhakti, made spicy with karma yoga and cooked in the kitchen of made spicy with karma and cooked in the kitchen of yoga, and made so simple that even a 5-year-old can understand it. He said this in one letter, and he also talked about his conversation with Tesla and some new ideas that he had around Prakriti and Purusha and the way to make more modern sense using electromagnetism and physics and things like that. So Swamiji is a mercurial mind because he's taken what he's heard, understood it in a very deep way, and is now trying to reformulate it and recontextualize it so it has currency with today's world, because the stuff that is said about this information in a previous day's world might not have currency in today's world. We're a very different audience with very different samskaras. So having said that, if you look at the Ramakrishna mission, the sadhus and the way that they dress, the sadhus and the way that they present Ramakrishna, the way that they understand Ramakrishna, and the way that they express their relationship to Ramakrishna, it's so dazzlingly diverse that that itself should be a teaching. And so what can you say about Belur Math and its official stance on Ramakrishna when every one of the sadhus of Belur Math seems to have their own unique interpretation? Now, if that's not clear, if you look at Belur Math from afar, and if you think what your Vedanta center where you live says about Ramakrishna is the be all end all of Ramakrishna, then you might look at someone like me on the internet saying things about Ramakrishna that's a bit different from what you might have heard from your Vedanta center, which probably is kind of like Protestant flavored anyway, because probably most of the congregation there very likely going to be from a Protestant background. And probably the Swami also, even though they're wearing Gerua and although they've been to India 1 or 2 times, like you can't deny that they're also perhaps a Westerner who also has that Protestant kind of karma and samskara, and so all of that's going to, and that's not a bad thing. It all offers a different way of looking at the same thing. But you might think, if somebody outside of Belur Math is presenting Ramakrishna, and if they're presenting Ramakrishna in a way that I don't yet understand, that's wrong. Do you know? And so a lot of people who have a problem with the way that I interpret Ramakrishna, it's mostly the case that they don't try to understand. You know, they don't engage and they don't have a conversation and try to figure out why I'm saying the things that I'm saying, or if there's any basis for me to say what I'm saying, because I'm always ready and willing to defend these claims with scriptural appeal and with reasoning, and, you know, like just the conversation would be really nice. But the ones who have tried, I've also noticed they might just not get it. A lot of them, even if they're willing to engage and listen and learn, it still doesn't imply that they're going to learn. So that's what Bhairavananda and I are like just conspiring about. How do we increase the quality of our pedagogy? Which now brings me to another point about school and about learning and about poetry and about the intellect. This is going to be very difficult because it's not meant to be exclusionary or condescending, but you have to remember the Shakta path is about engaging all of one's faculties, physical, intellectual, emotional, as well as mystical. And so you cannot then demonize any aspect of life if every aspect of life is included in the sadhana. So physical development is something that Swamiji cared a lot about. And there might be some relationship here between the physical constitution, the physical health, and like even the flow of blood and one's intellectual ability. So it's almost like if there isn't physical strength, there might not be intellectual strength. But again, by physicality, we might be talking more about prana. So it's not the Annamaya Kosha naturally that we're interested in, it's the Pranamaya Kosha, to use yogic language or Upanishadic language. Now in this sense, you could be someone who is very physically developed, but you could still be really exhausted and fatigued the whole time. Or you could be someone who is physically maybe like some health problems or something like that, but you might have a lot of prana. And that prana can be expressed as like alertness of mind, the ability to stay with something for a long time. You don't get bored when you're doing an activity that you really love, or you just can have a long conversation with someone, you don't feel like it's taxing or waning. This kind of thing, like of just prana, is very hard to understand also. So a person must be very pranically enlivened. That's one thing. And not only that, if one is pranically enlivened, that will manifest, of course, in a certain physical vitality. But I will argue where it's most important here is that it manifests in a certain like kind of intellectual vitality. So how to bring more prana into the brain? Swamiji would often talk about diet, and he would say in India, people are becoming anemic and like weak and lethargic because of their like food purity rules. They're so obsessed about what to eat and what not to eat that they end up just like not getting enough nutrition. Swamiji goes so far as to say that it's less important that you eat pure food, and it's more important that you eat strengthening, nourishing foods. So a lot of people who come to this study just don't have the body for it, we would say. Just don't have the physical constitution or the pranic aliveness that would allow them to engage with ideas that are so pranically subtle or so intellectually refined, or at least so intellectually diverse as to require a really subtle, really mature mind. What an interesting idea that studying all of this maybe begins with just looking at whether or not you're nourished and whether or not you're empowered and invigorated. And then all you have to do is figure out what that would look like for you. And that's also a complicated process. Now let's say we're coming to the mind and just to the mind, putting the body and the body strength and the prana's enlivenment aside. Developing the mind becomes very important here. And so having Sanskrit classes and learning Sanskrit, that's one thing that can refine the mind. But also there are so many other things, like just like generally interacting with a vast array of literature, using the mind by thinking through ideas that might be difficult for you. These are all things that refine the mind, and these things must be done because unless the mind is very refined in its ability to like find subtlety and nuance, in its ability to discern between one idea and the other, then once you come to Tantra, if the mind is not like that, the whole thing will become like a jumbled, mangled mess, and that is problematic only because it depletes prana then. Then it's like your mind just like becomes diverse and scattered, and you don't understand anything, you just like fuse out. And all of this was really made clear to me when yesterday, Bhairav Anand and I are coming home from our like little ramen conversation, and there we're hashing all these things out. And in the Uber ride on the way back home from the ramen place, we're in full swing. I'm just like kind of, you know that meme from the Always Sunny in Philadelphia thing where like Charlie is standing in front of the whiteboard and he's looking absolutely like crazy? I know I'm probably sounding like that right now. I've been like that for the past week trying to think about all these things. So much vata, so much udana vayu in this kind of activity. But I was probably like that in the back of the car, just like going off. And mind you, I'm in this like 3 days no sleep state, and just like fucking just like going off on all the complexities and why studying Chintamani or Tattva Sangraha would be important to understand the cause and effect thinking that influences the Raudava Agama, and why that cause and effect thinking was central to the Pashupata Sutra and their understanding of karma and their leveraging of karma as a path to realization, and how that is in dialogue with things like Jainism and Buddhism because of their emphasis on vratas, and whether or not puja or mantra japa would even be like valuable in a context where a vrata and a lifestyle, a vow and a commitment itself was considered the goal. Like there's so many things we're talking about. I'm just talking about all this stuff, and we pull up to my house and it's time to get out, and the Uber driver, who was listening carefully the whole time, just turns and very calmly but with great like reverence says, "That was a very interesting conversation." And I don't know what his background is. He had a slight German accent, so I'm like, okay, maybe. Because, you know, the Germans, they know compounds. German language has big compounds, just like Sanskrit. And some of the first translators of the German language, of the Sanskrit language, were Germans. So, like, people like Schopenhauer and things like that. They had access to the Upanishads maybe before many people. So, Germans are very good at in some sense, philosophical and... they have a very rich philosophical tradition. So, when Germans, with their linguistic complexity and their philosophical refinement, when they come to the Sanskrit traditions, they tend to get a lot out of it, as it were. It's very important that in Shakespeare's Hamlet, Horatio is like studying in Germany, right? Like he's got a very logical, like refined and systematic mind, but there's limitations to that too, arguably, because then Shakespeare needs to like teach him that there's more to heaven and earth than is spoken of in your German philosophy books, Horatio. But then you could also say that the German tradition and the Sanskrit tradition have a lot in common, and maybe that was his background. I don't know. He had a European accent of some sort, maybe German. And he looks around to us at the back and he says, "That was a very interesting conversation." And I kind of apologized to him. I'm like, "Dude, I'm sorry I just like nerded out in the back of your Uber. It was all just vama, word vomit. I'm just like all over the place." And then he says something interesting, because he notices, I think, whether or not he understood the Sanskrit words that I was using, or whether or not he understood the context of what I was talking about. We were talking about Buddhism alongside Shankara, and whether it'd be valuable to like really truly immerse yourself in Buddhism, because so much of the stuff that we study in Shaivism was written in a Buddhist context, in dialogue with Buddhist ideas. So to what extent would you need to like really understand the difference between Theravada and Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhism? Do you need to know the difference between Prasangika Madhyamika and the Gentong Madhyamika? Like, would that nuance be valuable to understanding the Indian Sanskritic tradition as a Hindu expression? So to what extent do you need to read Vasubandha, the Yogacara Buddhist system? Or do you need to read Nagarjuna? That would just be like too much and too difficult and too taxing on most of our minds, ours included. So we were talking about all these things. I don't know to what extent he understood the context for this conversation, but he understood this much at least. It was a conversation about fine, refined, and precise discernment. So he said something that like gave me chills. I think I'd heard this phrase before, but I forgot about it maybe. It's like a adage, right? It's like a common phrase, but the way he said it in his quiet way, after like that 20-minute spiel that we just had, where there was no space, no silence, just filling everything up, that silence, he just like put something there that hit me. He said, "Angels dance on the pin of a needle." You know? And to Viranatha's point, that was the poetry of that moment. It just like cut through everything, and it was like, this is valuable. Because angels, they dance on the pin of the needle. Wow. What a thought. Oh my god. Oh, what happened? Oh, okay, am I back? And by the way, I want to apologize. The sun is starting to set, which is wonderful. It's Sandhya Arati time. My like thing, my light, I guess I've lost all enlightenment because my light won't turn on anymore. I broke the thing. I was like traipsing around the house trying to get some things together, and I stepped on it and it broke. So this light's not going to come on anymore. And so there's no enlightenment today. It's all just tamasa vidya. So all this stuff is going to confuse you and enmesh you in even more ignorance. So there's no light, and therefore when the sun sets, this audio quality might be a little weird. So I'm sorry about that. But hopefully the sound is okay and you can see me somewhat. But anyway, so then when he said that though, right, like angels dance on the pin of the needle or on the tip of the needle, it's quite a profound thing to say, because by angel, if you understand that as sura or deva, it's one who is subtle in one sense. It's like subtle because they have a lot of sattvika qualities, meaning the mind is very clear, it's very equanimous, and it's very discerning. Now coming back to the dhatu for deva. Divya can mean light, it can mean glory, but it can also mean playful. So you might notice when you're very like safe and when you are very fluent in something, you can also be playful in that thing. So if you really know the English language, then you can be punny. You can be like playful with the way that you use your language. The people who are writing the Sanskrit texts, like Abhinavagupta and his disciple Shema Raja, and before them Uppaladeva, they were masters not just of the Sanskrit language in like a mechanical way. Just by learning grammar, you can become proficient in Sanskrit in this way. But no, they were masters of the Sanskrit language because they were thinking in Sanskrit with all the flexibility and fluency. And they applied that to be able to say many things at once, elliptically, poetically, and somewhat masterfully. That's what makes studying them very difficult. It's easier to study other traditions where the writing is a bit more direct, like the Upanishadic tradition, the Buddhist tradition, especially Theravadan Buddhism. The emphasis is on being simple, concise, direct, and therefore the language that they use is very direct. It's very simple. Like, look at Shankara. If you read any of Shankara's commentaries, of course he was also 16, but if you look at any of his commentaries, the language is quite simple. The Sanskrit is pretty accessible. But then when you look at Abhinavagupta, you're like, what the fuck is going on here? Even if you knew Sanskrit, it's like hard to understand sometimes, because not only is his Sanskrit so playful and so dynamic, but he's also sometimes going to use poetic language like symbols and stories and things, and many of these things might be lost upon you because as a Western speaking audience, like the cows and the lamps and the mountains, these things are not necessarily going to culturally translate. So it was a funny thing. Yesterday, my friend is in yoga teacher training, and she sent me her teacher training's translation of the Karpura Gauram hymn. Like Karpura Gauram Karunavataram, right? And I thought I would take a translation pass at it just for fun. Like I want to do a free and loose translation of that hymn and try to capture some of the nuances that maybe that translation might have missed, right? So I started Karpura Gauram, you who shine like camphor. And then I added, because camphor, when it burns, leave no residue behind. As such, O Lord, you are bright as you are light. That's the important point. It's like bright, and yet there's no substance there. It's light, it's free. It's a free luminosity. The empty luminosity of camphor. Notice, camphor is not something you might likely have in your house if you don't do daily puja and if you don't engage in like Indian religious contexts, right? That's an important point because you might not know what camphor smells like. You might not know how it burns. You might not understand that it has a lunar, milky quality that represents the Shukra, the stars, or that looks like Chandra or Chandra Jyoti, the light of the moon. And more importantly, when it burns, you might not understand that it disappears. These are all the cultural connotations that would come with the word camphor. So if you start the statement Karpura Gauram, you can't just say you who are camphor and you who are gold, or you who shine like camphor. What is it to shine like camphor? Another thing to note is that camphor is like disinfecting. It cleanses the house and its smell is so beautiful and so fragrant, but most importantly, it vanishes without a trace. Do you see how all of those nuances can be lost with a direct translation? And yet, if you add all of these other words, those aren't there in the hymn. These are words that I am adding in order to bring out the meaning of the word camphor. So, Karpura Gauram Karunavataram. Avatara. Oh my God, the word avatara, tara means to protect. So, ava means like a kind of descent, like avesha, like ava isha. Isha means Lord. So Ava Isha, Avesha, means that Lord, that lords over you, that in one sense comes from above. So Avesha means to be possessed. So if I'm possessed by someone or something, they have lordship over me, which comes from beyond me. So the word Ava might not necessarily mean from above, it might mean from beyond or from behind. So Tara means to protect. So an avatara is some kind of protection that comes from above, from on high, or from behind. And avatara is usually understood as incarnation. But what the fuck, right? Like that word incarnation is not at all going to convey all of those subtleties and nuances of Ava, that which is transcendent, and Tara, that which is protecting. So does Lord Shiva take an incarnation? It might not be necessary for him to if his compassion, if his Shiva Twa can just flow from beyond and possess you and influence you. Cool. Yeah, and then now Avesha, Avatara, the word Ava, like Avarudha, these are all things that you might understand in the root Ava and then in the place Tara. But if you consider Avatara as one word, you might think, oh, like Krishna or like Christ or like Ramakrishna. Maybe, but what kind of Avatara? Karuna Avatara. He's the incarnation of compassion, or he's that compassion that comes from beyond to help you. These nuances are beautiful, I think. And then you have this idea of Karunavatara, Samsara Sara, Bhuja Gendrahara. Again, very loaded because Samsara, Sara means, so interesting, essence. Do you know? Sara means essence, among other things. So Samsara, if you see that word, you've probably been conditioned at this point with all the interactions that you've had with Buddhism maybe or something, to see Samsara to be like problematic maybe. Like Samsara means suffering. Usually we translate samsara as dukkha. That's actually a Buddhistic way of looking at samsara. The word samsara to a large extent has been co-opted by Buddhist language. That's fine. That's also valid. But it doesn't necessarily have to mean suffering. In fact, Nagarjuna, he then reevaluates samsara to mean also nirvana. So nirvana is samsara, samsara is nirvana. There are two ways of looking at the same thing. But he's willing to engage with the idea of samsara being problematic or full of suffering. And why? Because it's coming and going, as it were. Something is coming and then it goes. And then the ephemeral, like transient nature of that coming and going makes you feel like you've lost something, or then you're like afraid of something coming in that you don't want. But Sara just means essence, right? So Sara means a gathering of essences. So samsara is everything together. And everything together means Vishva. So it doesn't necessarily have to have the connotation of samsara in Buddhism, though we might project that into the word. Right? Isn't that beautiful? Right, you guys? Right? Like, wait, do you see now why it's like so hard actually to like teach this stuff? Because when I look at the word samsara, I like think of these things. Like I think of sam and I think of sara, and the meaning of the word samsara will be influenced by that Sanskrit understanding. But if I say the word samsara to you, I've done you a disservice because I just assume that it will mean for you what it means for me. But then when you see the word samsara, immediately you will project a Buddhist sense of this is problematic. Do you know? And that might influence the way you receive the next thing I say. So I'm like realizing like I'm not really doing my job. Like I'm getting frustrated. I'm just gonna admit that I'm getting like really frustrated because I've been teaching the same things and I think well. I feel like I'm articulating these things well, but I will like teach this thing to a person who will sit there and blink at me for 4 years, and then I will actually ask them for their level of comprehension and they won't know, or they like struggle. And maybe that's not the point, right? Maybe the point is like you just want like charisma and shit. You just want to come here and like feel some shakti and it makes you feel better. It's like you're cheerful. Like, so, okay, fine. Like spiritual stuff is happening. Maybe that's the point. We just come together and we feel good and like, sure, cool. But I'm just not the kind of person that's going to be content not doing my job. And maybe my central job, as I understand it, as Acharya, is like teach a tradition, which I think is really worth teaching because it's so diverse and so beautiful. And so even if you get like the juice from it, that's not going to be translatable without the system that is preserving that juice. Do you know, the juice comes from this system, and if I can't convey the system, and the juice will just flow and it'll go away. So that's like my fear. It's like I'm not doing my job in the lineage if I don't pass on what the lineage passed on to me, but I'm experiencing a block sometimes where I can just like teach and teach and teach for hours and hours and hours, and then someone brought up to me that maybe it's just the length of this kind of thing that you do. It's you're just talking too much, too fast, for too long. What can anybody retain? Maybe that's not the point. That's not why people come and listen. They're not here to retain. They're here to just like feel. And it's more like an art thing. It's more of like a performance, like it's entertainment. It's not education. I'm like, cool, but can't it be both? So that's the thing. It's like, how do I get to the place where I can actually convey what I mean? Because I thought I was doing that, but I'm realizing that I can do that better. And going back to the drawing board, we're like, okay, it takes some kind of subtlety with the language itself. The tradition is conveyed in Sanskrit, so when you see the word samsara, understanding the compound sam and sara might actually help feeling into the dhwani, into the word, in a deeper way. So in samsara, saram, this is interesting because samsara means a gathering of essences, right? A gathering of all things together, which makes for the Vishwa, the Jagat. What is the essence of that? The essence of all essences is Shiva. So how would you translate the word samsara saram? That's a difficult thing to translate, actually. And the essence of all essences, the soul of all souls, that is Shiva. Samsara saram. Bhuja gendraharam. Bhujanga means serpent. Bhuja Indra, the lord of serpents. Hara, the destroyer. But what about the word Hara? We can like understand that on an even deeper level. Ha, now I'm going to be tantric and less like etymological. We'll use some mystical tantric understandings of bijas. Ha means samhara. Ha here means the destruction bija. Ra means fire. So the fire that destroys. That's Hara. Hara is like a fire that destroys. And Bhuja means serpent, the lord of serpents. So even the word Indra, does it mean that he destroys Indra and serpents? Or does it mean that he destroys the lord of serpents? Or can you break them up and can you say he's the destroyer and he's the lord of serpents? It's like a really interesting way you can like think of so many different things, and all of them can be applied depending on what you want to express. So Bhujagendra Haram, Samsara Saram, Bhujagendra Haram, Sada Vasantam, Hridayara Vinde. Why would you even call the lotus, the heart, a lotus, like the lotus heart? That might not translate well if you haven't seen lotuses, or you don't regularly like interact with that imagery, you know. So the lotus, we just accept it as a symbol, but its metaphorical value would be more pronounced if you had lotuses in your house, or you had a lake strewn with lotus flowers and you watched how they bloomed when they were kissed with light. The same way the heart can both open and contract, Sankocha and Umesha. You saw how the lotus was in 3 realms. It was in mud, and it was in water, and then it's in air. So the idea of Swaha Loka, Bhuvar Loka, Bhu Loka, all of that can be mapped onto the 3 realms in which the lotus lives at the same time. So lotus, one who is lotus born, Padmaja, that person means one who is like comfortable in all 3 worlds and who has recognized the essence of all 3 worlds. So the heart is a lotus that's fully bloomed open at the kiss of this jnana, and he abides there eternally. Sada Vasantam. But by heart, Hridaya is not necessarily meant the chest or the like region. I would say the word Chitta means the same as the word Hrit or Hridaya. But if I say Chitta, then you'll translate it as mind, right? But mind is a very loaded word, both in Buddhism and of course in the Western like epistemological tradition. Mind is typically understood to be something like intellectual and conceptual and analytical and logical. But here we would say mind is that interiority in which, yes, all of that is experienced, but also all emotions are experienced, all dreams are experienced, all like intuitions and insights are had. The mind here, the word chitta, means more like interiority or inner subjectivity, or that private place within you where you feel most you, in which you have your experiences in the most intimate way. So chitta, right? The word chitta is similar to the word hridaya, and this is described as an inner space, chitakasha or hridaya desha. To describe this as a space or as a lotus flower or as a fire, hritagni, these are all various ways in which to convey something using metonyms and metaphors that might have meant a lot to one culture but might not translate well to another culture for whom those metonyms, those symbols, are not a part of day-to-day life. So I sometimes take these things for granted, and I fail maybe to convey the cultural context around certain things because I assume those things. So that's my bad. Hridayāravinde samsara saram bhujaginda sada vasantam hridayāravinde. Now, even the word vasantam, like there's so many nuances to the word vastu. You'd say vastu shastra means Sanskrit. Fuck, it means feng shui. I just had like such a like glitch right there. I was like, vastu shastra means like feng shui, the shastra, the science of the way objects are arranged, or a science surrounding objects. Vastu shastra. But vastu, the root vas in Sanskrit means light, which brings it closer to the Greek word vesta, like a vestal virgin in the Greek and the Roman context would be a woman, a priestess, whose role was to keep the sacred flame alive. So vas means light. So when you say an object is vastu, the vas refers to the fact that the object shines as a cognition in the clear light of consciousness. So in the light of consciousness, the object shines. It's a shining thing. So here, vasantam can mean abide, but vasantam can also mean shines within. That which shines within the lotus heart, or that which shines within the inner space of the mind. Always. Sada vasantam hridayāravinde bhavam. The word bhavam means world. Bhavani sahitam namami. Now, we have to understand the nuance that bhavam means the world, but Bhavani means the one who rules the world, and here we say the world is Bhavani. The consort of Lord Shiva, Parvati, is the world. Bhavam Bhavani Sahitam Namami. I am always praising that Shiva whose consort is Bhavani, who in this case here means the whole world, who is always shining within my lotus heart, who is the essence of all essences, the destroyer, the lord of serpents, who shines like camphor because camphor is bright yet light, and who, most importantly, helps us with his compassion, with its compassion from beyond. Something transcendent is implied, and yet the immanence of that transcendence, that's also implied. So it's profound. There's so many things going on, and just learning grammar, vibhakti, just learning pronunciation, it's called shiksha, learning sight reading, that's not really going to cut it in most cases. So what would Sanskrit education look like then on this level? That's been the question for us. And I think we started a little bit last week. Because I thought this, I was thinking, we're tantrics in the sense that we're like exposed to tantric literature. And in tantric literature, there's a lot of conversation around language, naturally. And that's because of mantra. Like the centrality of mantra and the use of mantra as a sound symbol in the tantric ritual context, that's maybe the first and foremost place in which mantras are employed. But then also later in the meditative and the contemplative context, because mantra is applied in all of these contexts, and because mantra is essentially a sound symbol, its centrality in the tantric world means that much thought has been given to what it is and why it works the way that it works. And because mantra is a sound symbol, and most mantras are going to be in Sanskrit, if not all mantras are in Sanskrit, then the question then has to be moved to Sanskrit. Like for mantras to work, we must understand sound, but if Sanskrit is a system of mapping and systematizing sounds, then we must understand Sanskrit. But the people that are now expounding on Sanskrit are not just pundits of grammar, and nor are they just interested in teaching a language. These are now masters who have realized the absolute nature of reality and are now trying to present it in linguistic terms. And that's really thrilling. So I thought, okay, this could be our approach. To enter into Sanskrit, we perhaps first have to start with a realization of the absolute nature of reality. It's like, oh yeah, you can't really study this stuff until you're like fully liberated and enlightened. And I'm like, wow, thank God that's so easy. Because it is! It's so easy. Nothing could be easier. It's the most direct kind of thing. But only with that grounding in reality, only then will Sanskrit make sense, because Sanskrit emanates from reality. So understanding Sanskrit from the Jiva point of view is going to be like fun and fruitful and meaningful. But understanding Sanskrit from the Shiva point of view is perhaps more foundational. It's almost like saying the best way to study Sanskrit is to yourself create Sanskrit, invent Sanskrit. So starting from ground up, starting from the pure primordial space of consciousness, to be able to feel the way mantras emerge in that space, that's how the Sanskrit language gets articulated and conceptualized and systematized. So we have to start there. We have to start before Sanskrit, as it was, and as it were, and that's consciousness. And then what Abhinavagupta does in chapter 3 of the Tantraloka, and what other masters do in other places, and to some extent what Panini himself does in Ashtadhyayi in the first 14 verses called the Maheshwara Sutra, which later turns into this Nandikeshwara Tantra. Like, these kinds of conversations are about the phonemes and how they map onto consciousness, or more importantly, how they emerge from consciousness and how they form the foundation of the world that you see, both internally and externally. So this level of subtlety with phonemes, if I'm like, Daya. The word Daya means compassion. What is Daya? You should be able to understand that phonemically. Understand what Da means and understand what Ya means. Da, Danam, to give. Ya, as in Yam, air. So that which gives air, or that which gives like air, is called compassion. How beautiful. Then you can be really poetic with this. You could be like, we live not by bread alone. It's not enough to just breathe air. The real air that we breathe is the air of compassion. All I need is the air that I breathe and just to love you. You know, the idea of like air being all pervasive, and that which gives all pervasively is Daya. So again, then you could say, well, Daya means that which gives air, meaning that which enlivens you and saves you. So like if you're like choking or like underwater, Daya, compassion. When compassion flows to you, it will feel like air. And Sri Ramakrishna liked to use this, you know, it's so interesting how this stuff maps to stories of Sri Ramakrishna, because he'll give this metaphor. He'll be like, do you want to learn about God? How badly? And he'll give the metaphor that a guru took the student to the river and put his head under the river, and the student was gasping for air, and you know, just before he like drowned, the teacher pulls the student out and is like, what did you need most in the world at that moment when you were under the water? And the student's like, air, I needed air. When you want God with as much intensity as you wanted air, then we'll talk. But arguably, when one gets God, or one gets teachings about God, it should feel like air, like I can breathe again, almost. Do you see all those connotations are there in the word Daya? Compassion, which is nothing more than like the experience of air when you really need it. But also another thing about Yam, about air, is that it's all pervasive. Do you see how, unlike any of the other elements, air can flow everywhere? Space might be a bit too static for this metaphor. Space doesn't flow. Space holds space for flow. What flows in space is called air, motility, or vayu. So air, vayu, these are all Yam. So Yam is flowing around. Yam also means to join, because air joins all things together. It sometimes sounds kind of crazy or schizophrenic when you explain it out. Do you know, because when I say Yam, you know how Yamala works? Or like Sangam, the idea of Yamala, connection. The connection that you say, the word Yamala, that connection is the same as the way air connects all things together. So the idea of connection in Yamala is also implied by air. Whereas with air, you have connection and you have motility, movement. So therefore, the metonym of air, it's a metonymical way of thinking. The metonym of air links to either one thing, and if it links to many things, then it has metaphorical value. So whether it's a metonym or a metaphor can be debated. But air means connection, air means pervasion, and air means flow. So compassion then is to give in this way. Give in this way that connects you to another person, or gives in this way that is pervasive, or that flows, and more importantly, that includes, because air tends to flow everywhere, and it doesn't ignore one part in favor of the other part. Naively speaking, not talking about heat or the way air is flowing or whatever. So Sri Ramakrishna, he says Daya means compassion, and compassion means seeing everybody as God and loving everybody. Whereas Maya, he says, which is his antithesis to Daya, is when you love some people only. Notice it's not it's not an absence of love. It's a contracted love that is only for certain people that constitutes Maya. Whereas Daya is not what you would call Daya in this day and age, because you say compassion is when I like my friends and do good things for my friends, or when I like my family and I do good things for my family. So we're praised for being good to people that it makes no sense to not be good to. Do you know what I mean? It's like that doesn't work. It's like if you're only good to the people that you like, is that even compassion? It makes more sense to be good to all, and it's especially important when you're good to people that you don't like or don't care about or have nothing to give you. So all of Kant's ideas around morality can be engaged with here. It's not quite the categorical imperative, but the idea of like acting from as opposed to acting according to duty. So here Kant would say, if you were a shopkeeper, is it honest of you to tell people what things cost and then to give them the accurate amount of change for what they gave you? Yeah, of course it would be noble and honest to do that, to tell the truth, but it's also in your interest to do that, because if you are a cheat and if people come to know that you're not giving them enough change or you're like upselling things, then they'll stop visiting your shop. So there's like a material advantage to being good, and then you can't really say you're good, because even though incidentally what you did was good, you might not have actually done it out of goodness, but you might have done it out of calculation. And then everyone says that's being honest. Well, the real test, and this is a very Christian way of saying it, is like the sacrifice, where it's like if what you considered if what you thought was right came at a great personal cost or a great sacrifice, and you still did it, it must be because of its innate rightness. You know? We were talking the other day about something that happened. Like we were talking about like would I have maybe not brought that person to the ashram for the like Shivaratri Oxnard retreat? You know, like we were like, is there a world in which I wouldn't have paid her $300 to come and like not paint the fence? Or is there a world in which I would have not invited her to come and stay the weekend? Or would I not have like defended her every time like Sambhavi was like trying to like hold her accountable? And I was kind of like, yeah, no, I don't think there's that world, because it felt right to me to have her come and be there. And like, because it felt right to me, that was enough. And arguably, even having seen what happened, it's like, no, we'd still do that again, because it was the right thing to do, as it were. And so Kant's idea is like, in that case, if you like reflect on something and say this comes at great personal cost, and still you'd be willing to do it, then it was the right thing to do. So then, like at Atlanta, that choice between staying at the Dhuni all night or like going back inside, that might have cost me my marriage. I think. Like when I think about it, I'm like, that might have been the singularity where it was kind of like, okay, fuck this guy for Vijay, you know. And I think that was a valid choice for her to have made. But I think I kind of sensed that if I stayed at the Dhuni for a fourth consecutive night of sleeplessness, I would be like choosing to do this thing over that thing, but it felt right to stay. And the question then is, if I known that would be the consequence, would I have still done it? And so retrospectively, you can look back on these things, and it's a wonderful thought experiment, because in the future, if it's guaranteed going to harm you to do the right thing, would you still do the right thing? And Kant would argue that like, if you were really thinking straight, you would. There's something about rationality that makes for a deep sense of morality, and he might not even explain why. It's just like the fact that when the mind is clear, it's connected to reality, and when it's connected to reality, it acts from reality. And therefore, it doesn't matter what happens. That's just the expression of reality in that moment. Do you see how daya as a word can be so complex? You can do a Kantian exegesis on daya and apply it to your own personal context and see, am I being compassionate? Because if I was truly compassionate, I would give to everyone, not just to a few people. And more importantly, I would give to them just what they need. Because air to one person might be very different from air to another person. You know, like somebody who needs food should be fed, not given a lecture. And someone else who is well fed and intellectually starved might be due for a lecture. So therefore, knowing what to give different people at different times based on their needs and giving equally to all with that level of sensitivity, that's daya. So when you look at the word daya or hridaya, the word daya is in hridaya. So you can then bring that into hridaya, and you can see the reference of air and the heart and air and all of those things. So if we started with the phonemes, and we knew what each phoneme stood for or could stand for, or the variety of various shades of meaning that are embedded in the phoneme, then starting from ground up, we could construct, I think, a richer, deeper, more holistic, and more like integrated kind of Sanskrit. Right? Okay, that's the project. So far, so good. Are we all... Yeah. You look a little bored. Is this like not really that cool? Is this like just too nerdy? Because I want to do something fun. But I'm thinking maybe we should review a little bit the stuff from last week very quickly, just to walk you through all the sounds and quickly explain what each of those sounds mean. Because what I want to do is tell you my favorite mantra in English, and it's only recently become my favorite mantra in English because it's the mantra that I need Diksha into, you guys. So if anybody can give me Diksha into this particular English mantra, I think it could save my life because I just don't use it enough and I need to use it more. But I think especially, it's like the karma of all women in this world to learn to use his mantra, as it were. And we're going to explain why it's so fucking hard to use his mantra. And this is the stuff that I'm really excited about. So maybe let me just start with that, and then we'll do the review at the end. So, I'm really excited about this idea, actually. I'm just trying to find a way to explain it that doesn't sound so cracked out and ridiculous and like schizophrenic, because I know that sometimes that's how it comes across. Because the idea that I want to express has to do with karma and ancient civilizations like the Aramaic or Hebrew civilization and the Hindu civilization, and their ability to have like mapped everything so perfectly. So when you look at karma, the concept of karma is itself so rich and so deep, and it's an attempt to systematize the universe. So the Vedas, based on Sanskrit grammar, and Sanskrit grammar has a certain kind of logic to it, is a way to map out all the possibilities of the universe and to explain what happens when you do X or Y or Z. Because X, Y, or Z can be understood in terms of like every other point of data that that system holds. And it's a pretty vast and like encyclopedic system, and therefore it's created some ritual technologies that are truly quite powerful. But it's still a kind of way to feel like you understand, or like you can control, or like you can predict. You see, karma is very powerful because it's an understanding of the universe that makes the universe a little more predictable. You see, if I understand things on this level, I know what action will result in what outcome, and therefore I can control which actions to do and which actions not to do in order to get the outcomes that I want and avoid the outcomes that I don't want. So you can see the lifestyle of like a very orthodox brahmana is an incredibly controlled lifestyle. Like everything is like mapped out from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to bed. Everything is regimented, and you don't have to understand why these things are worth doing. You just have to do them, and very soon your life will prove to you that they work, because you're in alignment now with dharma. So if you live dharmically, that is to say, if you follow all the rules of the smriti, all the ways prescribed for you to like live your life, the Jewish tradition is very similar. There's ways to like wash your hands before you eat, like what do you do when you wake up? Right as you wake up, there's a way to wash your hands. When you enter into the cremation ground or the cemetery, like a Jewish girl was teaching me how we went to a mother's cemetery, and I was interested in like learning Jewish death rites alongside like, my question was, why do you call it sitting shiv? What a beautiful thing to say. Like sitting shiv is like Shiva, the mortuary symbolism I was trying to map between these two cultures. So she was showing me how she would wash her hands and how she would do achamanam essentially before she went into the cemetery. And I was also contemplating how like the Jewish rabbi's life or the Orthodox Jewish person's life is about as regimented as the Brahmana's life of today's era. So these are two cultures that have a very like controlled way of living because they have a very like vast understanding of the universe, right? And Brian G, you were here for this when we like, it will never be as good, I think, in this lecture as it was then. And so I'm happy that happened because Brian was there when we did this whole experiment with Patrick. Patrick G, you were also there. And we were like, it was so fun because we had this cup of water, and I think we like did this experiment with the cup of water to prove the power of a certain mantra. So like, we'll get there. But Brian G, I'm happy that you're here. And you can tell me if I miss anything. If we have a system like karma, or if we have like an understanding of the universe that the early Jewish masters must have had, it's very helpful because then you can live in a way that ensures a harmonious and productive life, as well as some kind of spiritual outcome. Maybe like that's like going to a heavenly loka or an ancestral realm in which you achieve even greater joy. So the purpose of life then is to attain joy and meaning, and to live in a way that is conducive to that, both in the here and the hereafter. These systems therefore are very helpful because they do just that. So predictability is kind of the goal. Mapping things out to understand those things is only insofar as we can predict things, predict what will happen. And once we have predictability, that I think conveys a sense of safety, right? Like there's a feeling that I'm safe, that I'm secure, because I can predict the outcomes that are going to happen, because I understand all of these actions and I understand all of the outcomes of these actions, and therefore I can select those actions that I want and not do the ones that I don't want in order to get the outcomes that I want. Therefore, one of the most awkward things to do in like day-to-day life is both to say and be told the word no. Right? That's really interesting to think about. So like the demonstration we did was this. I think I picked up a glass or something, I forget, and I handed it over to Patrick G. And I was like, Patrick, would you like a glass of water? Now, arguably, I expect him to say yes because I'm making an offer. I'm offering him a glass of water. And if he says yes, that interaction is going to like proceed the way I expect it to proceed. So once he takes the glass of water, done. He might say yes, and he might take the glass of water. Or he might not even need to say yes. He might just take the glass of water. So with his action, he's already said yes. And by the way, once I say, would you like a glass of water, it's going to actually be difficult for him to say no, because my invitation is like a projection of will onto him. So my itcha, my will, is that he should take the water. I then act along that will to reach out with the cup of water and ask. I use vach to express that will and say, I want to give you water. I will give you water. Will you take water? Now, it's his itcha shakti interacting with my itcha shakti, and in that moment, he might feel awkward saying no. But it's going to be worse for me, arguably, because if he says no, now what happens is the one-to-one relationship of me handing him water has turned to a one-to-infinity relationship where all the other choices that I could make in that moment, in the next moment, are suddenly all of them together available to me. Do you see? The reason why no might be really complicated is because it interrupts a predictable flow of energy, and once that energy doesn't flow the way I expect it to flow, it's then released and made available for all the other possibilities that could happen, and that's terrifying, arguably. Because then the next thing I could do could be any number of things. So if I give him the water and he doesn't take the water, now I'm there holding a glass of water, what will I do next? It makes sense to put the glass of water down, but wait, there are infinite points on the ground and on all the surfaces of the house upon which I could put the cup of water. So putting the cup of water down is itself another like permutation of infinity. Or I could give the water to some other person, but there might be infinite other people to whom I could give the water. And if they all say no, then I'm back to my infinity of the ground. Or I could throw the cup, as Brian G suggested, I think. And there are infinite points in the room at which I can throw the cup. Or my favorite thing might have been to have upturned the cup over my own head and gone, which is such a crazy and funny and like zany thing to do, only because it is accessing a possibility, one of infinite possibilities that you might never have expected one to access. And that's what makes it funny. So it's almost like humor, and this is like a theory of I know, good, you can feel like the energy of this is very like Plutonic, and there's a Kali-esque power that can be reclaimed once we understand the mantra no, the English mantra no. And then we'll do some Sanskrit phonemic understandings also. Yes, no. So if then I pour the water over my head and it splashes all over me and I'm like, or something, I make some kind of sound, it's funny actually. Like some people will find that funny. They'll be like, hey, that was a possibility that I didn't expect. But because that possibility just got expressed or presented, it suddenly makes me feel lighter. Lighter in the sense that I now feel like there's a vaster world of options and of experiences. So in that moment of humor, especially like zany, like eccentric, practical humor like this, which many teachers in the Sufi world and the Shaiva world have often demonstrated, like teaching from like shock value or from performing or like just doing something unexpected. Shiva himself is considered a bit of a wild card, where he'll just like do something that you never thought he would do, and that itself is the teaching. And the Zen tradition is full of parables of suddenly something unexpected happening. And by the way, I'm also distinctly aware that in the Zen tradition, there was a master who would just say mu, mu, mu all the time. And only now I'm finally understanding why that mantra, mu, is so profound. Mu means no, I think, in the Japanese. And there was like a particular Zen master who just kept saying no. And recently I'm like catching the craze. I'm like, oh my god, I also kind of want to do this because it's so powerful. Once you say no, you come up, like your itcha is flowing and you like expect, you're like, can I? You make your request and that person just says no. And they might not offer any reason. Now, if they say no, you might be tempted to ask for a reason. Right? And they might be tempted to give a reason. So now I'm going to expand this. I'm going to say the power of no is most powerful when it stops at no. When no reason is expected and no reason is offered. Because the moment you offer a reason, you close off that infinite possibility again. The no is awkward because once you get to that point where the person says no, In that moment, everything becomes unreasonable. Unreasonable in the sense that all infinite options become available to you all at once, suddenly. Where before, the infinity was contracting into a specific thing. The vishesha, we say, the general, sorry, how do I put it? The general has become the specific, the vishesha. Or the expanded has become the contracted. So the sankocha of possibility is my question. Do you want this cup of water? So I'm handing the cup of water, I'm saying, do you want this cup of water? All the infinite possibilities now have narrowed down to one, which is the handing of the cup of water. Then Patrick G, if he says yes, good, done. That was that whole sankalpa, and that was the phala, the fruit of that intention. That's closed, case closed, and then we go on to our next thing. And by the way, the next thing might be scripted by the first thing. So the next thing I do is in dialogue with the first thing I do. So if the first thing I do goes well, wonderful, I'll just flow into the next thing that I'm going to do. And ideally the next thing will go well. Going well here means happens the way I expect it to happen, and then I'll flow to the next thing, and then that's my life. I just go from one yes to another yes to another yes, and I feel quite safe within this whole thing. The no makes me feel unsafe. Why? And we would argue that it's this. The moment I get a no, that process is interrupted, the flow of Icha is impeded, and is now released. And when it's released, it's confronted suddenly with the dazzling display, the diverse range of all the things that it could possibly do, and then it gets paralyzed. Like Sylvia Plath, except now she's under the tree and there's like infinitely more fruits, and the ones that were already overwhelming for her, what to say would happen if we were presenting like way more than that, infinite points. It's terrifying because in that moment, the systems of predictability, of transactional expectation, of safety, of security, which are all premised upon a yes, in that moment, they don't help you. And in that moment, you're confronted with something maybe the mind cannot hold all at once. That's kind of how it feels when you want to learn Tantra. So when you come to Tantra and you're like, I want to learn Tantra, Tantra might just say no, right? It's just like, no. Because what can you understand of it? And then it's like, I want to try to understand, but the more that you understand, the less of it that you really get. And it's like humbling and gratifying. Now in that moment, a few things can happen. You can just realize, oh my God, infinity, and just pause there. Like 8 years, right? Brianji can just like elapse, and you can just be like Sadashiva meditating because you're not willing to act on any possibilities. So the world might have said no to Shiva, so Shiva just said no to the world, and he sat in meditation. And in his meditation, he might not be acting. I'm just using the Sadashiva model here. He might not be acting, might be taking any of these possibilities. But then arguably from Somananda onwards, in the non-dual Shaiva understanding, we say Shiva is acting in meditation. Within his meditation, he thinks of all these infinite possibilities and expresses them or plays through them. And so like Akshay-ji, Kit, like Eshama, these are all nodes in Shiva's self-expansion, and it's him exploring all these different possibilities. So he like says yes to Esha, he says yes to Akshay, he says yes to Kit, but that yes is coming from the power of no. So the no sets up this infinite possibility, and then he says yes to some of those possibilities. And then he plunges into the leela of being that particular person, or exploring that particular like experience of being a table or being a chair, or destroying the world, creating the world, any set of essences gathered together. Each essence, the essence of essences, Lord Shiva, is exploring a possibility in that particular essence. So he says yes to everything. But the reason why Shiva can say yes to everything is because he says no to everything. By saying no to any one thing, he's actually saying, in a way, yes, or possibly yes, or maybe. By saying no to something, you're saying maybe to everything. Isn't that wonderful? So maybe might be even scarier than no. No is firm. Maybe is kind of like maybe, but maybe everything else. But the problem with maybe is that it doesn't open you up to everything else as much as no does. Because maybe still keeps that transaction open. So if I'm handing a cup of water to Patrick and I'm like, hey Patrick, do you want a cup of water? And Patrick says, maybe. Okay, well wait. If he's saying maybe, then there's still a chance that interaction might happen. So I might still focus on it, do you see? Like when somebody is attracted to you and is like hitting up your DMs and it like wants to go on a date with you or something, and you say maybe, then they're like, okay, I'm gonna keep trying. Because there's like a possibility. And the problem is when you say no also they keep trying, which is also a problem. But like, because they think your no will change to a yes. In fact, they need your no to change to a yes. Because if your no doesn't change to a yes, you don't rescue them from the tyranny of infinite choices. And most of us, I don't think, feel equipped to handle that. We don't feel powerful enough to face the unknown. So then it brings me to thinking about John Keats's negative space. You've heard about that? Like John Keats, he writes poems, but he articulated in a somewhat exegetical fashion something about poetry that I really, really like. He talks about poets and their ability to be in the negative space, the space of not knowing, the space of uncertainty and unsurety. The thing about yes is it's certain. If somebody says yes, there's a certainty and a safety in that certainty. If somebody says no, I'm now uncertain about what to do next. If I ask for a reason, if I'm like, Patrick, why don't you want water? And notice we're all like kind of tempted to do this. The moment someone says no, we're not like ready to like explore any other possibility then and there. Usually we must process that no. We must ask, why did you say no? And then they like start explaining, and it might be hard to explain, and then there's all this like almost guilt and shame around having said no. Why would you feel that guilt and shame if no didn't somehow do harm to a person? It must in one way, shape or form do harm to that person. And I think that it does. I think the harm that it does is that it exposes them to the infinite possibilities of the universe outside of that one possibility, and it forces them to expand when they would really much rather contract. It forces them to be in uncertainty when they would really much rather be certain. It actually interrupts your sense of safety and security because it short circuits the system, which is granting them that sense of safety and security. So if you take a material reductionist paradigm, you could say once you understand all the laws of science, or many of them anyway, you can see the world as this like predictable machine. And that's very tempting and comfortable because then you can just like frack at will, you can destroy the Amazon, you won't feel like you're inflicting any harm upon a person because the universe is not a person. It's just like a space in which things happen mechanistically in a predictable fashion that can be learned in a scientific academic context and then which can be manipulated with our machines in order to create the change and the desired outcomes that we want. If the world is understood to be a person, a being, the way ancient cultures and many modern cultures today are trying to articulate the world as, then it's like an ethical and moral responsibility that we might feel uncomfortable about. It's a being that I can't communicate with. It's hard to like ask the world's consent before I like frack or before I cut trees in the Amazon. And there are some cultures that will do that. They'll pray to the tree and they'll be like, is it okay that we cut your branches? Or pray to the animal and say, now we're going to like kill you and then we're going to eat your essence. Please enter into me and strengthen me. There are cultures that still practice this, and arguably almost all cultures all around the world pre-Neolithic era, maybe they all had this kind of like reverence for nature, seeing it as a mother to be interacted with, as a living, breathing, pulsing being. But of course, in the modern scientific reductionist materialist paradigm, it's quite convenient to think of the world as mechanistic, as predictable, as law-oriented, and as deadened. It's just dead matter and dead energy. And even if you can cultivate some sense of reverence for that dead matter and dead energy, even then you might think, it's just a concept though. So you can think of nature and universe as a concept, and you can be conceptually invested in maintaining the balance of nature and the harmony of the universe, and you can be conceptually like attracted to it and find it to be elegant and beautiful. That might be very beautiful, especially for a scientist who finds nature and the universe, even though inert, to be beautiful. That's wonderful. That can really help your work. But it won't, I think, give you enough juice for truly like ethical and moral and compassionate action. It's only when you articulate nature as like a living being that you start to feel the same ethical like responsibility to nature as you would to another living human being. Therefore, the more you can deny people their humanity, the less you can see them as living, breathing, ethical beings who, in their chitta akasha, in their interiority, in their mental space, feel the same things that you feel. Then you can easily use them as means to an end. The way that we treat nature, we see her as a means to an end. So with women, this happens a lot, where like a woman's humanity is often denied. And we see like in the Neolithic era, there are many cultures around the world, like in Mesopotamia, that would like talk of women as they would talk of property. So it is like property, it's inanimate. It's just like clay or something like that. And the woman arguably is like a body or like a machine through which one can get pleasure and like produce offspring or something like that. So the languaging around women and the languaging around possession becomes closer and closer in many cultures in the Mesopotamian tradition in like the Neolithic era. So much so that when you look at the book of Job, this is very interesting. Job has a wife and children, and he has animals like cattle, and he has possessions. And it's really interesting to see how when God is testing Job, he's like taking things away from Job, but they're almost all discussed in the same way. Like they're all just like these things that Job has. Like Job has a wife, and now he's lost a wife. Or Job has children, now he's lost children. He has cattle, and now he's lost cattle. He has the respect of people, and now he's lost that. Do you see the idea of like the respect of the public, the idea of wife and child, the idea of cattle? They're all possessions for Job, and God is like divesting him of these possessions. God is saying no, essentially, to Job, and he's like okay with it. He's so here for it. But if women are possessions, like if we see women as objects, or if we objectify a woman to mean like we're not interested in what she has to think, and we're not interested in who she is beyond her body, we're more interested in what she does for us in the context of our life. And in most cases, like she's a piece of furniture that at best will like be nice to me and comfort me and like pleasure me and like cook in the kitchen for me. Like the kind of a widespread idea that we don't necessarily want to know what a woman is thinking. In fact, if she expresses what she's thinking, people become intensely uncomfortable. So I had this thought recently with regards to like material reductionism and with regards to the fact that we like to see nature as inert and inanimate. If nature is indeed inert and inanimate, it's a wonderful thing, because then we can just go on fracking and go on like doing whatever we want without necessarily feeling weird about it. Because I think most people would feel weird doing those things to nature if they felt nature was embodied and a being with the same kind of interiority they had. But I think the same thing happens when we make movies, like, you know, say like a movie. For it to pass the Bechdel test is for it to have female characters who are having a conversation that are not necessarily about a male character. So you're decentering the male character, the protagonist, which is typically male, and maybe recentering a female character, and then being interested in what that female character has to think. And so most movies will not pass the Bechdel test, right? Even if there are women in that movie, they're probably not going to be talking about subjects that are uniquely important to them, but maybe what they're there to do is like be a manic pixie dream girl for like the main character or something. So they still serve an instrumental function, and their world and their thoughts might not be that important. So I think a good example maybe is like, do we really care what Ramona Flowers thinks? Right? Like, do we really know her? Or is it enough that she has like blue hair and that she's eccentric and that she helps the main character, the pilgrim named Scott, like develop? So the point here is that like if we gave women more of an opportunity to beep, if they were allowed to speak more, if they were allowed to express themselves, that would mean that they had an interiority in which they felt feelings that we feel. It means that they're beings, like enlivened jivas, sentient, conscious beings. And that might be deeply disturbing to many cultures that are not willing to like consider that. The same way it would be disturbing for a very scientifically minded, materialist, reductionist tradition to look upon the universe and think that we owe it a responsibility because it's a being. So I think the way that we treat the universe and the way that we treat the women is to avoid thinking about it. And therefore we don't really want to talk to them. And if we talk to them, we're really not that interested in hearing what they have to think. Maybe we can use them as sounding boards or something where like we just like talk at them or something. But once they start talking, it's like kind of problematic. It's scary. And it's really scary when they start talking about things that don't include everyone else. And so when a woman tries to do that, it imposes like a conscience or an ethical responsibility on people that I think they might not like. And I think this is why. A conscious being is arguably more free than an unconscious being, in that a conscious being might make an unpredictable choice, whereas an unconscious being might act more deterministically. So a rock is not going to suddenly, in most cases, jump and fly off the ground, unless there's like an earthquake and it's sent off the ground. So you can predict things about rocks more easily than you can predict things about people. And so the less people are people, the more predictable they become. So if you're really scared of the universe, if you're really scared of possibility, if you're really insecure about your ability to like explore and expand and deal with all the different possibilities, not only will you deny women their like subjectivity and their ability to make unpredictable and different choices, but you might do that with everyone. You might want to objectify everyone. You want to say like that they're not conscious beings, and when they act in a way that's unpredictable, that's bad actually, because that proves that they're conscious beings. So now I want to expand this idea beyond just women to include also children, because then those children, when they're put in schools, are made to be as predictable as possible. That's why a lot of schools would have like uniforms. Like I have to predict what the kids will wear, because if they don't have a uniform, they could wear any number of things. Do you see where this is going actually? I know I'm like kind of like going crazy right now, and I hope that's okay. I hope it's still cute and endearing, and I hope that you're still following along with this. But the idea is that like predictability is something that we are trying to do when we articulate karma. Predictability might be what we're looking for when we create systems with X, therefore Y relationships. And we impose this same safety seeking, security seeking on our social interactions by creating systems with rules and regulations that are meant to ensure predictability. So when I have a school, I need to make sure that all the children in that school think the same thoughts. Therefore, I'll have an exam or a test, right? And that test will see whether or not that child is thinking what I want them to be thinking. So there's a right answer, a wrong answer, or a more right or a more wrong answer. So the more they test well, the more they're aligned with the dominant thought. Or at least some kids, they can actually test well and also not really care. But often most kids, if they test well, that's an indication that they're thinking the thoughts that we want them to think. So if everybody, teacher, leave those kids alone, we don't need no education. This idea of if everybody's made to look the same because of the uniforms, if everybody's made to think the same because of the uniforms, and if everyone feels a sort of social pressure to act the same because if they don't, they'll be punished. Basically, we're training everyone to be yes people. Yes men, yes women, yes gender non-binary people. Just yes people. They're saying yes. And if you say no, that's the problem. The teacher says, can you write something on the board? And you say no, they'll be like, how dare you say no? You have to say yes. They're like, do you want to do this test? And you're just like, no. They'll be like, no, you have to do this test. Do you want to come to school? You say no. And they force you to come to school. Isn't that interesting? There's a standardization. And the standardization in school is to maybe divest children of their own thoughts. And if they want to think their own thoughts, it must be within certain parameters that are safe and okay. So true creativity then, that the don't hug me, I'm scared thing. Have you seen that one? Don't hug me, I'm scared. It's like a zany little skit that's anyway, it's on YouTube. It's a cute thing, but it's exploring how creativity is not really creativity because a character there who's teaching everyone to be creative, and someone's like, what about green? And the character goes, green is not a creative color. There's even a paradigm of creativity, and if you go outside that paradigm, you're not considered creative anymore. While creativity itself might be to go outside the paradigm itself will not agree. It's called Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Also, give me 1 second. I just need to grab something real quick. So, it's absolutely essential now to see that the less I think humans are humans, the less I think that other people outside of me are conscious beings endowed with will, knowledge, and action, whose free will might mean they can do something that I don't expect them to do. That's scary because it reduces the predictability of my environment. So some people who are scared of people, if you're scared of people because of how unpredictable people are, you might retreat into science and machines. And there's a really cool Lord of the Rings kind of claim that I can make here. Because you see Sauron, he's trying to mechanize the world. He wants to bring everyone under his control so that everything will be predictable. Why is he so interested in control? What would releasing that control look like? Why would that be so scary? He's got a surveillance state set up, right? He's got his Palantirs and he's looking, right? Oh my fucking god. Right? He's looking through his Palantirs and he's monitoring everybody. Sauron has a surveillance state because he wants to reduce the predictability of people. If I can't surveil them, I might not predict what they're going to do next. So I better watch them all the time. Big Brother is watching the Rage Against the Machine song. It's Little Brother is watching too. So if we have a surveillance state, we have maximum gyan, as it were, over everyone. We know what they're going to do. And then we have the depiction of Sauron as being really interested in machines. That's kind of interesting, right? Machines are predictable, and Sauron is obsessed with machines, and he's trying to make the world into a well-functioning machine, and everyone is a cog in that machine that he can control. The point here is that maybe he's afraid. There's something insecure within that doesn't want to confront unpredictability and uncertainty, and therefore wants to make everything certain and predictable, and therefore becomes a tyrant. And Saruman, arguably, is depicted as someone who is very good and beautiful and loves trees and nature and stuff, but then he has a mind for machines and metalworking, which attracts him to Sauron because Sauron is the master of that. So Sauron teaches Saruman how to make all these machines, and in the second Lord of the Rings movie, it's supposed to make you feel afraid when you see how Saruman is building these industrial revolution-esque things. it would be nice for many people, I think, to think of other people as machines. That if they do this, that person will do that, the way a machine works. But then they go into the world and they realize, no, people are unpredictable. And not only are they unpredictable, they change. Who they were yesterday is not who they were today. Who they are today is already really unpredictable because they could do any number of things that I wouldn't be able to like foresee. But even if they weren't that way, I mean, so, like, that's problematic enough. But the fact is, the person I'm dealing with today might be a very different person from the one I'm dealing with yesterday. So the unpredictability of yesterday compounds with the unpredictability of today. And the moment this happens to me enough, if people start doing things that I don't expect them to do, I could easily just be like, okay, fuck this, I don't want to interact with other people. It's just like too scary. I don't know what could happen. But if I interact with machines, if I stay in my laboratory and like I'm just all alone in my Saruman tower, I'm just like building things and like I'm trying to control, right? So the Industrial Revolution, and not necessarily science, but I think science, you guys. I think science is our modern day attempt at what the early Brahmanic Vedics were doing. It's kind of like what the early Jewish people were doing. And I think it's beautiful, but it's also a little bit fucked in some cases. Because it's like a control tendency. It's a way to try to create safety in a world that doesn't feel safe. And humans could be the least safe thing because they're maybe arguably the beings with the most choices. At least animals, they have instinctual patterns that might predetermine their emotions and behaviors a little more than humans. Do you know how they say like a wolf is safer than a man because a wolf is a wolf, but a man is a wolf to man only because sometimes you expect him to be kind and then in his kindness is buried some kind of guile. You just can't predict with humans the way you can with animals. And I've been really excited because in my life recently, in the past year or two, I've seen some really unpredictable shit happen and it's like kind of delightful. Like my favorite thing, I think, is when I think I know someone and then they do something completely other than what I expect them to do. In that moment, I like love them the most. I'm like, whoa, that was the most human thing you could have possibly done. You used free will to totally flip the script on me. And then I realized that's so deeply baked into my personality too, because if I enter a room and there are rules about how to be in that room, I immediately instinctually try to break those rules. It's like my bid for freedom. You know, I'm like, okay, if I follow these rules, then all the interactions in this space are going to happen in the way that everyone expected them to happen. That would suck though, right? Because if I did something that was outside of the rules, that would add so much color and richness to this environment. And so therefore I can be a bit of a clown. And my court jester clown bhava is to just do something unpredictable as often as I can. And so I like to change things up. So if like, you know, we're doing a certain text or something, it's funny and fun to me to just like go to a different text. Or if I'm in a room where there's like a very scripted way to do things, I like to like do something different than that. Even when I was a kid, when I was writing in notebooks and stuff, if the notebooks had lines, I would purposely write outside the lines or write across the lines because I knew that the notebook was inviting me to write within the lines. But I have Uranus and Neptune like rebel placements that don't allow me to take that well. So if someone's like, okay, do this. If someone tells me to do something, I'm very likely going to not do it. Even if that was something I was going to do anyway, the moment someone tells me to do it, I'm like, now you are imposing your will upon me to do it. And more importantly, now you predict that I'm going to do it. So if I do it, it matches what you predicted. And therefore, I'm doing you a disservice. On some deep level, I think I intuited that if I do what you tell me to do, then I'm meeting your expectation and your prediction. The moment I meet your expectation and prediction, it locks you in a world that you think, it locks you in the concept of a world that is predictable and safe. But that's not the kind of world that I want to be in because predictable and safe is also limited. Unpredictable and unsafe actually means infinite and variable and unexpected, which seems so much more creatively rich to me, so much more thrilling. So I'm starting to understand the Sufi pranksters a bit more, or the role of the jester, or I'm starting to understand the role of artists who like just like really change the script on us, or I'm starting to understand the role of Shiva in the Puranas, of just being like such a wild man eccentric whose job is to show up at the party. You know that story we told some weeks back where the Brahmanas are doing Homa and Lord Shiva shows up and just like is naked. No one expects him to be naked. There he is naked. And he does his crazy dance. And it's a dance that no one's ever seen before. And that frees the Brahmanas who are at that ritual from being so rule-bound and rigid and obsessed with control. So now every time I say yes and you say yes, we are continuing to propagate this notion that the world is safe and controllable. So science is a way of mapping those relationships in nature, laws. Sociology might be a way of understanding humans, maybe in order to control them. A lot of our laws and things like that are based on social theories that people have propounded based on their studies of humans and whatnot. History, anthropology, sociology, science. I'm starting to see all of these knowledge systems. They're all great, but they're all knowledge systems premised upon understanding, maybe in order to predict, maybe in order to feel safe. And now comes another idea. So this next idea I think is subtler. Maybe what I want when I ask for something is not the thing, but the safety that getting the thing will bring me. So if I want Patrick to take the water, and I say, Patrick, would you like some water? I want him to take the water. If he says yes, I don't actually want him to take the water. What I want is to know that what I want is possible, or that it happened, because I'm actually reifying the fact that my theory was correct. My theory was he'll take the water. I gave him the water. He took the water. Good. Therefore, the world is predictable. Do you see? Maybe that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for justification for my system or meaning-making pattern or my concepts that like make the world safe. Does that make sense? Okay, you guys. I know you're going to be nice to me because you're my friends, but does this suck? Like, is this just like not yet fully formed? Because it is like a new thing that I'm thinking about. And I don't think I like fully have it yet. I just have it like as a kind of like intuitional space. Yeah. Like that, like these kinds of things. Like black fight back, brown lie down, white good night.
But Dee, like, does it have to be fully formed to have merit? Like, can we not still all benefit by your musings and like, like I that perfection I don't feel is necessary for us to benefit.
Yeah, no, true. But it's the discomfort that I'm trying to cultivate with expressing something I don't fully know how to express, because it
Yeah,
itself is a demonstration of what I'm trying to say, right?
right.
Because like the best thing you can be is like, no, it doesn't make any sense. Like I'm trying to experiment with that. Because if you said no, it doesn't make any sense, then I'm like, wow, is it uncomfortable that I'm trying to express an idea that I don't really feel like I can articulate fully? Because that
Hmm.
itself is the experience that I'm trying to like share.
Yeah,
I'm like performing the sadhana, if that makes sense. Like I want to say something that I don't really know anything about. I don't want to rely on all the knowledge systems. I can like default, right? I can just like run on autopilot, which means I can just like teach the knowledge systems that were taught to me. Okay, here are the 24 tattvas, 5 bhutas, 5 tanmatras, 5 indriyas for the karmindriya, 5 indriyas for the gyanindriya. Here are 3 things that make up the mind: manas, buddhi, ahankara. Here's prakriti, and these are all the 24, and appearing to the 24 they appear within the Purusha, and the Purusha itself is a Sankocha of Shiva, who is contracting through 5 levels of Maya. Like, these are systems, and they're so cool, and I can just like default into these systems. But thank you. I'm so happy you said that, because I don't want to do that. And that's why I was so tempted, you guys, like, to just slip into the review of last week's material, because I know that material and it's from Tantra Loka chapter 3. I've rehearsed that material. I can just like tell you about what means and what means and what it means and what e means and what u means and what u means. Like I can convey all of those knowledge systems. But if I do that, then I'm just yesing myself. I'm staying within the bounds of what I know and teaching what I know to teach. But this idea I had maybe last night. Was it last night, you guys? What the fuck? Was it Saturday night? Whenever the fuck Brian G and Patrick and I were all having this conversation and Sananchi was like there. Like whenever we had this idea, it was like so new and so cool. And it's an idea about something so liminal that I hope you don't mind this like Wittgenstein approach of just trying to do philosophy together. So I want to open the floor in just a little bit so we can have a back and forth and ask some questions. But I want to close with the idea of the void and how the void links to the no. Because the circle, the O after the na, I want to parse that as a symbol, as a morphological and orthographic symbol. A lot of this period of my work, by the way, it might start sounding like Carl Jung Red Book minus like a few steps. Like it's a bit less structured. And that's just what I want. It's like more of a jazz approach to lecturing, if you don't mind. So the no, the serpent eating its tail, the void, that void idea is not a void in that it's nothing. It's a void in that it's not this particular thing. And if it's not this particular thing, it could be any number of other things, and there's no limit to what number of other things could exist. They're like literally infinite possibilities. Remember, if Patrick doesn't take the cup, if he says no, then if I put the cup on the floor, there are infinite places on the floor upon which I could put the cup. There are infinite places upon the table or upon any other surface upon which I could put the cup. If instead I choose to throw the cup rather than place it back on the floor, there are infinite number of points I could throw the cup. If I want to give the cup to someone else, there are infinite number of people that I could give the cup to. Or if I want to drink the water myself, there's like an infinite number of ways that I could drink the water. A little bit, the whole thing, half of it. If I pour the water on the top of my head, there are infinite number of places that the water can sluice down. Here's a joke, or a fun riddle. A rooster lays an egg on the triangular roof. Which side of the roof does the egg roll down? Does anybody want to play? A rooster lays an egg on a triangular roof, on a pyramidal roof. Which side of the roof does that egg roll down?
Roosters don't lay eggs.
Yeah, right? Isn't that beautiful? Roosters don't lay eggs, right? Isn't that cute? And it's kind of like, like we think that the question is about the egg rolling down one or the other side of the roof, but we forget to think about the rooster, and we're like, oh my god, the rooster doesn't lay eggs. Cute. So there are an infinite number of things that could happen if I pour the water over my head. It could sluice down either side of the rooster roof, you know? Or I could make infinite number of sounds. I could make any number of sounds as I pour the water over my head. Now, the fact that the infinite possibilities are intuited makes us so deeply uncomfortable that I think when we're told no, we don't like it. We're in a liminal space where infinite possibilities have awakened, and the particular possibility that I was trying to explore is now close to me, which forces me to confront those infinite possibilities, which before I didn't have to look at because I was focused on this one. So every act of no is a void. Right? So when I invoke the void with no. So if I were to like come up with Rishi Adi Nyasa, we could say, who is the Rishi of the mantra no? Kali. Or say Bhairava Rishi. He's the one who came up with the mantra no. And who is the deity, the devata, to whom this no is ascribed? It would be the void. Shiva as Shunya. So the void becomes really important here, because the void is the nothingness of that particular expression and the everythingness of every other possibility that is now viable because this one has been emptied out. Do you see? So the no invokes the void, and the void in this sense is not devoid. And that's, by the way, if the void was devoid, it might be safer. The reason why the void is so unsafe is because it invites so many actions whose outcomes I cannot predict. So it's a positive no. Yes, it's a no that implies fullness, but that fullness is the fullness of infinite possibility. Do you know how many times we say the word full and empty and things like that? And yeah, how much is infinity minus one? Exactly. And Royji is exactly right. Because even if I eliminate this one possibility of Patrick taking the cup of water from me when I offer him the cup of water and ask, Patrick, do you want a cup of water? Even if I eliminate that possibility, I think Royji is on something really deep here. He's saying, what's infinity minus one? Infinite possibilities don't become less just because this possibility is gone. So think about this, right? Like you're interested in somebody romantically and they are not interested in you back. Well, now there are infinite other romantic partners with which you can find the fulfillment that you were looking for in that partner. So is their rejection really that bad in the sense that you lost what you wanted? I think no. The real sting, I mean, it's that, and the real sting here is that now you have to consider every possible other option in the universe, and that's kind of scary. It's scary to think that there are infinite people with which you could find that fulfillment. It's much easier to think that this is the person that's going to give me fulfillment. Right? And I think this is the test case. So I think this is the way that you test where you are with this. If I say everything happens for a reason, how does that make you feel? You know, if I say everything happens for a reason, what's your like feeling here? How do you feel about the statement everything happens for a reason? You know, I think that's really based. Fernie is saying lack of autonomy. Asha is Bhairavi maxing and saying fuck everything. And Kit is very, very profound here and saying depends on if my friend just died or if I just won the lottery. Right? Like, and we don't want to, we don't believe in coincidences. We don't believe in random chance, because if there weren't any coincidences, if there wasn't random chance, then in some sense everything is scripted or everything is like predetermined. And if we say everything happens for a reason, You don't need to know the reason. You just need to know that it's there. So Viranatha is saying profoundly, indifferent, because it in no way implies that I know the reason. So what does it do? But it does something though. Even if I don't know the reason, it might just be comforting to know that one is there. Do you see what I mean? We want a reasonable universe, and we don't care whether or not we know the reasons. Okay, now I think I'm onto something, and now I think this will be a bit clearer. I want a reasonable universe. The Vedic and early Hebrew traditions have both presented a reasonable universe because they have mapped out so much of this universe, maybe not all of it, but so much of it. And what they've mapped out is so comprehensive that you can do Vedic rituals based off of it and get outcomes, predictable outcomes. Like if you know Tantra, then you know how to do a tantric ritual and you know how to enact change within oneself and in the world around oneself. That's incredibly seductive because it gives you control. And the whole point of control is safety. I want to control outcomes, not because I actually want those outcomes. Every time I do a successful tantric ritual and I get what I wanted, that confirms the fact that I have some control. But not only is that confirming the fact that I have control, the fact that I have control confirms the fact that the system which gave me the vidya, the knowledge that enabled my control, that vidya is based. Do you see? If the Vedas and if the Tantras work, then it must mean that they are premised upon principles that are real and true and reasoned out and mapped out and thought out and articulated and transmitted. So then I'm taught these principles. These colors mean these things, these sounds mean those things, and if I know how to use colors and sounds and actions, then by leveraging those things which I know, I gain control. You know how we say knowledge is power? And that's a wonderful thing. It's like we like that statement. We like knowledge is power because now, look at what that implies, friends. If I say knowledge is power, it means learning about Tantra means I'll have a certain kind of control over things. Control over myself, control of the world. That's the power. I'm looking for the power, but the power of control. Vashikarana. The power of control is itself a testament to the fact that things can be controlled. So maybe what I want is not to control. Maybe I just want the solace that things can be controlled. How about that? Oh, and come in. If that's a knock on the door, please come in. Jaima, Jaima, Jaima. Jaima, come. Let's see. Will this be Sananshi? Will this be Aja? Will this be Ruma? It is Ruma, Jaima. Welcome, Ma. Come. Oh my God, it's so good to have you. Come. I think I just sort of finished warming up a little bit in this lecture.
Okay.
And therefore, you're coming in at a good time because I think I'm coming to the end, which is perhaps the only sensible part of this word vomit that's been going on for 2.5 hours. So welcome, Ma. Jaima. Okay, so we have the Vedas, we have the Tantras, and through the Vedas and through the Tantras, we are given vidya, knowledge. This knowledge is of the principles of the universe, like how the universe works. And if the universe is understood as language, then understanding how language works will explain how the universe works. So once we understand language, then we know how to apply mantra. So notice this, the concept of the world as word, as the word of God that was with God, that is God. The world as logos, meaning like mind. If the world is sound, if it's vibration, then the Vedas and the Agamas are really nothing more than a systematic way of understanding sounds and vibrations and then employing those sounds and vibrations to get predictable, repeatable, tangible, and observable outcomes along the lines of those principles. And the Vedas and the Tantras are really fucking awesome because they really have those things mapped out. So if you learn the mantras, then you don't even need to know how the mantras work. You just have to apply the mantras and they will have their necessary outcomes. Similarly, if you live according to the Smriti, the Smriti tells you these are the principles of the universe from the Shruti, but don't worry about them. Don't think about them. They might be a little too esoteric, but just do this every day. Wake up at this time, and when you wake up, drink water in this particular way. Say this particular mantra before you drink water. When the sun sets, at that time, sit down and perform this particular ritual and use this exact mantra, Gayatri mantra, Om Bhurvuvah Swaha Tat Saviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Say that mantra, do japa with that mantra. There's a whole hymn that you chant, Sandhya Vandanam, you chant that, and your life will be good. And it's kind of like when I walk into a room and I turn on the light switch, the light comes on. But does that imply I know anything about electrical engineering? Do I know why the light came on? No, and nor am I interested in learning. Unfortunately, I didn't get that Indian gene of being tech savvy or good with computers, as you've all discovered, because I don't even know how to get my ring light to work today. And Bhairav Anandaji showed me so many ways in which I'm being so inefficient with my use of the computer because I just don't understand the computer, that he's like, there's like a shortcut for this, there's like an easier way to do this, and he knows all of those things. He like knows all of the ways in which a computer, like, he codes, he's a software person, and he's like in that world, and so he knows computers, and therefore he can interact with computers in a way that gets the computer to do what he wants it to do in like the easiest, most efficient, and most predictable of ways. And that's a power. When I see him do that, I'm like, oh my god, that's so cool. It's so powerful that he knows his way around a computer. Or someone who plays music, like if they understand the principles of music, they can do such beautiful things because you're manipulating the knowledge, the things that they know, to create desired outcomes. And we're like, oh my god, that's so cool. And classical music sometimes feels that way, where it's like, oh my god, everything is so elegant and so harmonious. And if I understand music theory, then when something happens that I expected to happen, I feel happy. And look, like rhythm, melody, they're all things that are predictable. Like a rhythm is nice when it's predictable, when it's like, and that just repeats. And you're like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, this is predictable. And maybe your joy is coming from the fact that something is predictable. The rhythm is so predictable that it makes you happy that it's predictable, and then you feel like it's a nice rhythm. Or maybe classical music, when the note that you think is supposed to happen happens, you're like happy because you expected it to happen and then it happened. You never wanted the note, you never wanted the rhythm, you wanted the certainty that came with hearing the note you thought you were going to hear, or hearing the rhythmic passage that you expected to hear after the previous one. Does that make sense? So if I asked for something, I'm like, Patrick, do you want the water? Okay, maybe I'll flip this around. Let's make it about the water. I want the water. So I'm like, Patrick, can you give me a glass of water? And Patrick says, yes. Did I really want the glass of water? Maybe. But more likely, I wanted the solace and the safety and the security of knowing that I got what I wanted. I wanted something. I expressed my will about it. It happened the way I expected it to happen and wanted it to happen, and so the water is secondary. I've now confirmed my theory that the world has laws and principles. I know those laws and principles. I employed my knowledge by articulating my action, either through like asking a question or doing a ritual, and I got what I wanted. Cool. So now see how no works. This class is about my favorite English mantra, and the mantra is no.
No?
No, just the word no. And in the Zen Buddhist tradition, they have something similar like this, mu. They don't really explain it, but there was a particular Zen monk who only ever said mu, no. Whatever you ask him, he'll just say no, and he won't offer any explanation. He'll just say mu. And I just now remembered that, but I wasn't thinking about this when we were talking about it the other night. But what's the value of no? No, in this moment, like totally impedes the flow of my will, but by doing so, it totally upsets my sense of control. Also, that's a fucking sick restaurant. I'm so happy that that was the choice that you made. I would have brought you there, actually. It's like a really cool place. Did you go in and see the... It's kind of sick, right? It's like kind of low light, and it's like good ambiance. Yeah. Thank you. So now if I say, Patrick, can I have a glass of water? If he gives me the glass of water, he gives me but what I want, but not maybe what I can truly benefit from. He gives me the sense that I'm in a predictable universe whose laws can be understood and manipulated to get predictable outcomes. He keeps me safe, but therefore he keeps me imprisoned in that system that gives me that safety, that system of laws, rules, regulations, and values. So when I walk into a room and there's a way to be in that room, like rules, right? Like you sit over here, don't sit over there, don't do this, do that. Like this is how you give someone something, you hand it with your right hand. Like when I come into a room like that, I intuit that my spiritual responsibility as a teacher of Shaivism, like as someone who is interested in freedom and in liberating a person from the tyranny of the world, I expect that like if I were to do something unexpected, that would in some way be freeing. Right? That's it. That's applied. Like doing something you didn't think you would do. Notice if you did that in like some kind of setting, if you like made a sound, especially as a woman, making a sound in like a classroom setting, the teacher will be like, excuse me, I'm teaching. You shouldn't be making noise over there. Isn't that how we felt in school? We made a sound and the teacher didn't like it and they were like, stop talking to your friend. But you know, we lost our power of no because they were a teacher. We're just like, yeah, okay. Yes, we said to them. And the moment we said yes to our teacher, their will was expressed and satisfied, and they were imprisoned even further in their binding, limiting crypt that they call a safe space. There's nothing safe about Shiva and nothing safe about Kali, because these beings usually come to destroy Daksha's yagya. Daksha yagya vinashinye. Daksha's yagya means a system of rules. The Vedic and Tantric system that has mapped everything out enough to be able to do rituals using those principles to create change. And then Kali comes in her Daksha Yagya Vinashini form and just fucks with that. And sometimes it's as simple as a prank, a practical joke. Instead of like Patrick giving me the cup of water, he could say no, and then he could pour the water on himself, and we might all laugh. And we're laughing because we're relieved, because in that moment we're maybe reminded of the freedom that's available to us when the particular thing that we wanted to have happen didn't happen. We're now happy because everything else could happen, and by Patrick showing me something that I didn't expect to have happen, I'm like reminded of that. So all of our pranksters and practical jokers, all of our like mystics and poets and artists and even scientists, they're at their most valuable when they break the rules, when they express something that was never before expressed, when they do something that was before never thought possible. And that's why jazz music is so thrilling, because the note that you don't expect, that's the note that when it appears delights you the most. The note that shouldn't be there, when it's there, that's what makes you really happy. So I want to explain this with regards to Vamachara and Kaulachara. It's like when you're worshipping Matangi, it's like you know what to do in puja, presumably, and Matangi puja circumvents your knowledge by resisting your urge to do it the way you've always done it before. So now it's like if you're going to offer somebody something with the right hand, and in puja that's very important, offering with your right hand, the left hand path puja will literally say, now use your left hand. It's like out of left field. You know, there's like English phrase, from out of left field or something. That's such a cool phrase, from out of left field, because it means like something you didn't expect has happened, but it's coming from the left. Like, what the fuck? How cool. And so if I offer with my left hand, at first I'll be like, oh my god, I shouldn't do this. Okay, then you do it, and you're like, wow, I just explored a possibility that I didn't know was there, and more importantly, that I wasn't like safe feeling was there. And now I just did it, and cool. That was pretty cool. And then it might tell you to offer things like things that you've already licked, or things that have already been consumed by other deities, uchishta food. Those things are the least likely things to be offered in puja. And so when you offer them, you're breaking the rules, doing something outside the realm of possibility, and therefore reaffirming the infinite principles of possibility. Now do you see why Matangi is sometimes also called like Neela Saraswati? That can apply to Tara also, but Matangi, she's Saraswati of Tantra, because Saraswati, she might teach, as it were, all the rules of like esoteric and exoteric society within a structure of rules. Matangi comes to teach you how to break those rules, arguably to liberate your creative power, so that it doesn't just flow within that system, but now is able to flow out into an infinite void of infinite possibilities. And so if I say to you, everything in this world happens for a reason, you might like that. You might like hearing that. Because when you hear that, you think, I don't need to know the reason, I'm just consoled that it's there. I'm just so happy that it's there, because that means this is a reasonable world. And all I want to know is that it's a controlled, safe, reasonable space. I don't want to look at the void, because the void is when what I thought would happen didn't happen, and now everything that can happen is once again possible. And that's an infinite number of things. So what do you do with this knowledge, especially as women? People don't really take your no seriously. Nobody takes no seriously, but especially for women and especially for children, those are two groups in society whose no means very little. Because those are two groups that might be the most unpredictable. For instance, a child can be very unpredictable because you're not yet socialized or conditioned to act in the way that people act in a predictable fashion in society. So the enlightened person can be very childlike in that they just like do things that might be unpredictable just because they're free from those conditioned patterns. The child has not yet learned those conditioned patterns, so it becomes that much more offensive to us, that much more of an affront to our sense of safety and reason if a child is not immediately indoctrinated to subscribe to those values. So the child's no is not taken seriously. If a child says no, we're like, yeah, fine, you might say no, but we're going to Disneyland, something, right? Now a woman, if somebody approaches a woman and asks something of her, notice most of us, especially as women, might have been conditioned to be uncomfortable with saying no. You know, there might be an inherent people pleasing, and this might not be true in every culture, but I think generally across cultures, across time periods, a woman might feel unsafe saying no, because she doesn't know what the person will then do. Because that person might not take that no very well. So they might become violent or they might become aggressive, as they do with children. If a child says no to a teacher, oh my God, you can see the teacher gets angry, right? Like, I'm trying to explain why that anger is, like, to some extent justified and where it's coming from. The teacher is angry because they are now forced to confront a world that is no longer safe or reasonable. Therefore, a child is one of the greatest symbols of unpredictability and freedom from conditioning. So for a child to say no, that's really scary. It confronts the teacher, and the teacher gets angry. So if a woman says no to somebody, to another woman or to another man or to a gender non-binary person, if a woman says no, that's also problematic insofar as, like, that person might not take it too well and might react violently or might get upset, and you might have been conditioned and trained to, like, prevent that outcome. To, like, keep yourself safe, maybe you have to maybe not say no so explicitly. So if a man asks you out, you might not be comfortable to saying no. You might have to, like, be like, maybe later, or I'm busy right now, or I have a boyfriend, or something, right? You just can't, like, outright say no. Now, if you say no, they might not take that no seriously. They might keep trying, right? Yeah. As you know, you might say, like, it's like there are, like, other ways to say no, but they're not as strong as no, because no is, like, just too much of a scary word for most of us, especially for women. Now, if you say no, notice the very next thing you might be tempted to do is explain that no, as if it's not enough to just say no. So someone's like, do you want to go out with me? And you're like, no. And they'll, like, wait. They'll wait for an explanation. And you'll be like, okay, it's because I have a boyfriend. Or I'm just not really emotionally available right now. And what's even worse is they'll be like, okay, fine. And they might try to talk you out of it. Right? They might be like, yeah, but... Or if they can't talk you out of it, they might keep trying to talk you out of it, or they might just, like, deny that you said no at all, and eventually, like, hope that there will be a time when your ability to say no is diminished. Or if they can cultivate or fabricate such an experience, maybe through, like, social pressure or through drugs or through some kind of violence or something, if they can, like, get you to say yes, then that's the goal. But maybe what they wanted was not your yes, but the fact that the yes confirms the predictability and safety of the universe. Do you know what I mean? Is that subtle? I hope that's subtle, because I think it's subtle. And so this is especially true. I have a friend who gets hit on by guys a lot, but she's not even interested in telling them that she's gay. Like, she could just be like, oh, that's sweet, but I'm gay. No, she's, like, such a badass. She'll just, like, be like, no. And they just don't understand. No. And then even if she tells them that she's gay, then they're like, yeah, but that's only because you haven't met me, kind of thing. You know, they're like, you're gay, but that's only for now. Do you know, isn't this a common experience? A lot of people in the LGBTQIA community, like, feel this, where they're like, their no is not taken seriously, and especially by, like, straight people who want to sleep with them. If they're like, I'm not the kind of person who would be attracted to you because I'm not straight myself, they'll be like, yeah, but being straight is normal and natural. Maybe they might have this implied sense, and you're, like, just kind of digressing from the norm. And because everything in society is designed to get you to, like, match the norm, then it shouldn't be that hard to get you to match the norm. I'm gonna like, keep trying and wait until you, quote unquote, come to your senses. And they might be, like, very liberal, like, pro LGBTQIA people, but the moment they become attracted to somebody and interested in, like, a romantic relationship with them, and they're told that, like, that person is not available because you're gay, they're like, I can fix them, or I can turn them, or something. And everyone is bisexual, you just, like, don't know it. Everyone's actually pansexual, you just don't know it. You know, like, it's like, no is so hard. So I just want to point your attention to this fact. It's hard to say no, and it's hard to say no without trying to offer a reason for it. But it's most important to say no, because that might be the only thing that can free a person from the tyranny of their reason, from the tyranny of their certainty, from the tyranny of their safety and predictability, which is what they've been trying to escape the whole time, which is what they hoped that they would get through practicing within the bounds of that reason and predictability. So if dharma is the goal, the question then is, will dharma give you moksha? If I play the game the way that I was told to play it, using the reasonable system of knowledge that was given to me by my tradition or by my society, then what am I going to get out of it? Arguably, you'll only get out of it more of the same. So you won't get freedom if what you want is safety, is control, is reason, is predictability. Because what is freedom? Arguably, freedom is unpredictability. A human is most free because they're able to act outside of what you thought they would do, in a way that an inert object might not be able to. The more mechanistic and inert something is, the less free it is. Swami Vivekananda argues this with respect to the steam engine and the worm. Just ignore your Somananda, everything is, like, sentient thing for a moment. The steam engine, the train, or I guess, we call it a trolley, but you would call it like a train or something. The train is powerful. It's got a steam engine. It's like hurtling down the train track, and it's made of all this metal, and it makes a big, large choo-choo sound, and it's got all these billowing gusts of clouds. It's such a miraculous thing, and we're so impressed with it, right? We look at this thing and we're like, oh, a modern marvel somebody invented using the like predictable laws of science, this powerful thing that can now carry coal and increase our wealth and make our life better. It can take you from point A to point B somewhat predictably, because it's just going to go on that track until somebody pulls a lever to save 5 people and kill 1. Somebody pulls the thing and the train tracks switch, and then when the train tracks switch, the motherfucking train will go on the new track that you just switched it onto. Like, that's so like thrilling. It's like thrilling that I have a game of trains now, and look, kids love like playing with trains, but sometimes they play with it in like a funny way. They like just do crazy shit on the train tracks, and the dad will come and sit down and be like, no, this is how you do it. You know what I mean? It's like, there was one time, one of my cousins or something, my nephews or something, he had this like Lego set, and so like I was supposed to build this Lego thing with him, and it was a really instructive moment for me actually, because I wanted to free him from the tyranny of the manual. The Lego comes with like this little thing that tells you what to do when. It comes with a puja vidhi, and the puja vidhi means there are certain actions that you must perform in a certain sequence in order to get your desired outcome, which is the picture on the box. And I think we were building something pretty simple. It was like a small car or some kind of device or something, and he wanted that thing. So I was wondering, why doesn't Lego just sell the thing? It sells the building blocks for the thing. But you know what Lego is really selling, I think? And this is the success of Lego. The success of Lego, you guys, I know, all this sounds like I'm spinning out and crashing out. I absolutely fucking am, and what are you going to do about it? But the success of Lego might be that what they're selling is certainty. If I follow the rules in the manual, I will get the picture on the box. So I followed the rules, and I got the picture on the box. Yay! Do you see why? You see how dangerous that is? It's training a child, as it were. Not danger, I don't think danger is the right word here. But you see what that's doing to the child. It's saying that if I follow rules, I'll get what I want. What I wanted was this little Death Star or like R2-D2 thing, and I did the thing, and I got the R2-D2. I got the R2-D2 thing. So like, it's good to follow rules, because if I follow rules, I'll get a predictable outcome. Rules are there to create safety and predictability and manage my experience. So I wanted to like help my kid, right? Like this nephew of mine or this cousin. And I was like, we have all of these blocks with different colors. We can like literally do whatever the fuck we want right now. Like, I could make something crazy, you could make something crazy, we could both make a different thing and like then compare those two things and see how they interact. We could both work together and make a wholly new thing. Each of us could like kind of collaborate, and then just like we can each add blocks as we want. To me, that seemed kind of interesting, because what you would end up with through that process is going to be so different. Even I can't predict it, he can't predict it, like that's exciting to me. So then, in a kind of like practical joke, I tore up the rule book, just to kind of make a visual of like how free it would be to like fuck with the rules. I was like, fuck these rules. Shh. Dobby is a free elf. Dobby has no master. And this was a really instructive moment for me, because the way he like wailed and screamed and cried, because it meant he wouldn't get the thing on the box. And I was perplexed, because why wouldn't Lego just sell the thing on the box? If what the kid wanted was the thing on the motherfucking box, then he could have just bought the motherfucking thing that was on the box already ready made. Isn't that beautiful? But he didn't want the thing on the box. He wanted a 2-hour process by which he got the thing on the box by finding his own ability to follow rules and execute them perfectly and be affirmed in his rule-following efficacy. And that's what I've also realized teaching this stuff. Like when I give a mantra and I tell a person to like do their sadhana, they want a lot of rules. And they want to know exactly when to do the mantra, how to do the mantra, how to visualize. And if I don't give them a clear set of rules, they sometimes freak out. Or if I expose them to the possibility of infinite possibilities, they freak out. And it's almost like now I'm chained to a rock somewhere and a bird is perpetually devouring my liver. I'm Prometheus bound, waiting to be Prometheus unbound, as per the Shelley idea. But like, most of what I'm doing is giving people fire. I'm like saying, here's the Padati, here's this mantra, here's this thing. And they don't like it, because then maybe it exposes them to possibilities. And then they want to limit that possibility, and they're like, okay, now give me rules, give me structures. And I'm like, girl, this is Matangi. What fucking structure could you want? I'm like, go off, queen. Like somebody once was working in a cemetery, and they wanted like rules. And I'm like, dude, it's a cemetery. Like, everyone's dead. Chill. Like, they don't care about rules. And like, why should you care about rules? Are you trying to stay safe? Like, what could harm you? Ghosts will harm you? No. Like, ghosts are your friends. You're a Shaiva. Relax. And what? Like, you're the kind of thing that can be harmed? No. Relax. Basically, I said to someone who was doing sadhanas in a cemetery, go off, queen. I was like reluctant to give her any like vidhi, any instructions. And she was really upset about that. She thought it was really irresponsible of me to let her go and do sadhanas in cemeteries without giving her a proper rule book for doing so, because I think she had heard on the internet that it's a dangerous thing to do. Maybe it is, but it's much more dangerous to be safe. You know, the whole point of the cemetery is that it's outside society, it's outside the rule book, it's outside the predictable, reasonable set of conditionings that we call the city. So a lot of sadhana in the tantric world is about leaving the city and going into a liminal chaotic space like the jungle or like the cemetery. Even Kurukshetra is interesting because war was something that was made predictable by the rules of Kshatriyas. There are rules of war, and I can predict what my enemy is going to do, or what my opponent rather. You won't really even say enemy in this context. I know what my opponent is going to do because there are rules of the game. But the thing about Kurukshetra is people aren't playing by the rules. Like, you know, when Abhimanyu is killed unjustly because the people that kill him surround him and kill him in group combat. Whereas in the Kshatriya Dharma, the rules are you should never engage someone except in one-to-one combat, and that person should be your equal. So when Arjuna enters the battlefield, he's gonna look for motherfucking Karna, right? Because Karna is his rival, his equivalent. So he should not be fighting some common foot soldier. Arjuna is way too skilled a warrior to fight common foot soldiers. Sometimes in my debate class, I like to debate my middle schoolers. That's really, from a Kshatriya point of view, like, not okay. I like to do it because I'm training them to be better. But like, I can't debate middle schoolers. I will win the debate, and I love it when I don't. And so why should Arjuna fight the foot soldier? He'll win that fight. And isn't it wonderful when he doesn't? Isn't it wonderful when Krishna is killed like a common animal? When Achilles is killed by a single arrow? It's like, it's kind of cool when that happens, the David and Goliath thing. But no, in Kshatriya Dharma, if I am of a certain level, I don't know, maybe there's like a chess rating to determine this or something, I should seek out another person on the battlefield who's my same level. So if I'm a foot soldier to Kurukshetra, just put yourself on the battlefield for a moment, and I see Arjuna, no one's going to expect me to take Arjuna on. And if I go and take Arjuna on, he'll be like, bro, chill, practice a little more, and then we'll talk maybe next year. I'm looking for Karna. So Arjuna's probably just like striding the battle. I mean, he's on his chariot, and they're just like going through the battlefield and like picking a fight, you know, like, who am I going to fight today? Oh, hey, look, it's Karna. Let's go. And then that would be a really cool fight. You know, so one-to-one combat is the Kshatriya ideal, even in like a group setting where everyone is like fighting together on the battlefield. But the problem with Kurukshetra is everyone's breaking the rules. Like, even in that game that Yudhishthira was playing, it wasn't fought fairly. Like, they were breaking the rules. They were cheating in this dice game. That's interesting, right? The motif of like breaking the rules is all throughout the Bhagavad Gita. It's all throughout the Mahabharata. Ashwatthama is dead. All these things. Anyway, I'm not going to get sidetracked too much here because I'm coming to the end. I've been coming to the end for a while. Maybe I'll never get there because there are infinite places to go. And sometimes I hope my lectures feel like that too. So people, not only do they have a problem with the fact that I'm so unstructured in the sadhanas that I teach and the sadhanas that I do, they have a problem with my lectures sometimes because the lecture has a title, but the lecture is not really about that title. In other words, they got a Lego box, there was a picture on the Lego box, but they opened the box and they found that the pieces in the Lego box didn't actually make that picture. Because I wasn't actually like planning to make that picture. I just like said that was the title because it's nice to have a title and it's nice to think about like where I want this lecture to go. But it never really goes there, and even if it ends up there somehow by some miracle of God, it usually goes all these other places instead. And so my lectures become incredibly unpredictable. You don't know if they're going to be 8 hours, you don't know if they're going to be 3 hours, you don't know if they're going to be 15 minutes. I love that. It makes me so excited, the creativity of that. I could be like, this could be anything. And the fact that you're not paying any money is really nice because then I don't feel like obligated to like deliver any particular good that you expected to get out of this. Because if you were all paying customers in one sense, you'd be like, I didn't get my money's worth. And I'm like, yeah, of course you didn't, because the thing that I'm offering you is worth more than any money you could give me for it. So it's like an invaluable thing. What is it though? It's not anything. It's just the void. You know, this lecture is just the void. And it's a void that I'm filling. I could sit here silently, but that wouldn't be the void. The void is not silence, it's not emptiness. It is the willingness to express infinite possibilities within that void. So here we are, just exploring, just going down tangents, just digressing, just thinking out loud, as it were. And so the void is almost a thought space. And in the thought space of Lord Shiva's meditation, he spins the fuck out. He crashes out. He's like a mad scientist who's thinking about all these possibilities and going through with some of them and not going through with others amongst them. So the best thing that Patrick could do for me in that moment is to say no. Because the moment he says no, it opens me up to everything else that I might not have been open to had he said yes. The best thing women might be able to do for others, other women, other men, other gender non-binary people in their life, is to say no. And more importantly, to not feel like they need to give a reason for that no. That's how you use this mantra. It's uncomfortable. This is Vamachara, to do things that are uncomfortable and realize that there's great joy in it, great freedom in it. So if somebody asks you something and on some level you feel uncomfortable about it, you can say no. And the permission to say no is itself a revelation for some people. You mean there was there was an option? There was an option to just walk away from something, just leave something behind without an explanation? There was an option for me not to explain my no? Like, this is a revelation. First of all, the fact that you can say no is a revelation to some people. It shouldn't be, but it is. And the fact that you don't have to explain your no is also another revelation. And that's something I've been learning too. Because as you know, my boundaries are not the best. And sometimes I maybe tend to go along with things that on some level I don't really mean to go along with, mostly in the interest of, I don't know, keeping the peace, or people pleasing, or making other people happy, or maybe not even that, but maybe just out of a misguided sense of sacrifice or something. But I'm not really doing them any favors, is what I realized. Because if somebody expects something of me and I fulfill that expectation, in that moment I am also, like the Lego company, reinforcing the idea that this world works, that rules, when followed, lead to desirable outcomes. But the only thing that you can get from following a rule is the certainty that rules work. Do you see? Because even the thing that you got itself wasn't that worth getting. It's maybe the certainty that thing got you. So then if all I do for you is give you that certainty, then I'm doing the opposite of my job, no? As a Shaivacharya, it's the opposite thing that is being conveyed. It's not freedom. The central goal of spiritual practice is freedom. The central ethos of our metaphysics is a reality that is absolute in its freedom, swatantriya. So the swatantra shakti is best expressed when you say no. And all of this is in response to someone who called me the other night when I was just about to go to bed. Somebody calls me, and I'm glad I said yes. Do you know what I mean? Because I wanted to go to bed, and I took the call, and it was this woman who was a really sweet girl, a friend of mine, and she was weeping, and she was really upset because she was in this relationship that was not satisfying to her. And the reason why it wasn't satisfying was mostly because her partner couldn't match her level of intensity, devotion, and expression. She was so romantic and so devotional that it actually kind of intimidated and frightened her partner. And I was telling him, I think a lot of Indians do experience this in romance, especially when they live in foreign countries. Because she was living in the UK, and I was thinking that maybe her way of loving people is not really part of that culture. It's it's something that might be called too much, or maybe just too intense. And she's a beautiful young dancer worshipping Kali, and so she's an expressive woman. But she felt like she had to tone down and censor herself, because if she didn't, then she might be alone. And being alone was maybe not the scariest thing. Being in a setting where there could be any possible partner, an infinite number of partners, was scary. Because she had this partner. Almost better the devil you know, right? Even if this partner is not satisfying, even if he's not meeting my expectations, it's okay because it's what I got. And if I need to tone down and censor myself in order to stay in this relationship, I will, because if I don't, I might end up being alone. And if I'm alone, the really scary thing about that is I'm then confronted with so many possibilities. So when she called, it was really interesting because she was coming to that conclusion herself, where she's I think I'm done censoring myself or toning myself down. I think I'm ready to love in the way that I want to love, even if it means I'm going to be alone. And then it's not going to mean that, because likely there might be other people in the world who will be able to hold my expression and match my expression and give me what I need. But even if that's not true, fuck it. Fuck everything, as Asha Devi said. Because fuck this. And so she was reclaiming her no. And by talking her through this process, it was really beautiful for me to see how hard it was to reclaim the no. And I think this whole lecture is coming down to this one statement. Reclaim the no. And that's something I need to know, and I need to learn. And I'm really excited for more initiations into no, because I think that's the mantra that I need. I need to like reclaim my no. And if it's true for me, how true is it for all the women in the world who feel like they have to say things that sound like yes or sound like maybe in order to assuage and placate the person that's in front of them? Because if they were to say no, that might hurt them, that might break their heart, or that might put that woman in a dangerous position where that person might react. But you know, no violence in this world is more violent than a yes that should have been a no. Because the least compassionate thing you can do for a person, as I've realized, is give them that yes when in fact you could have given them the opportunity to confront their own void. That in that voidness discover their own infinite potential. So if somebody says no, it's freeing. It's like if you're told no, you shouldn't say, oh, this possibility is gone, and fixate on the fact that this possibility is gone. If that upsets you, it must only be because you're upset that something you thought would happen didn't happen. When our expectations don't pan out, if you thought something would happen and it didn't happen, maybe, and I just want to say, like, as a conjecture, maybe what you're sad about, what you're angry about, what you're afraid and anxious about is not the fact that you didn't get what you wanted. It's the fact that we now live in a world where we don't get what we want. Is that appreciated, that nuance? It's not that we didn't get what we wanted. It's that we're now having to confront a world in which our expectations aren't met, in which we don't get what we want. And it's not a world where the logic and the laws work anymore. What a gift. What a profound gift. Nothing is the best gift you can give to somebody, because nothing is not devoid of things. It's a void radiant with the possibility of all things. And by the way, if you say no and then immediately reason out your no and offer an explanation, it stops being no. It re-enters the world of reason and logic and predictable outcomes. That's all I really wanted to say. It took me forever to say it, but I'm excited to have said it because this is my favorite English mantra. My favorite English mantra because it is a mantra insofar as it's a sound symbol, and as a sound symbol, whether it's na or no. In Sanskrit, na, right? Na. And in English, no. If it's a sound symbol, then it's a mantra. And if it's a mantra, it must have a deity, as it were. The mantra must be the sonic vibration representing a deity. And it's the highest deity in Shaivism, the void. Shiva, Kali, they're often described as a void pregnant with infinite possibility. And so the no is a Shiva mantra, necessarily, because it's no, and the no is the void. Nothing is the best thing we can give somebody. Not even silence, by the way. Silence is not even that good because silence can be projected into. The moment you like stay silent, if I was just here giving a lecture in silence, I wouldn't be giving you nothing. But if I was here with a nothing in front of me and I filled it for 3 hours with every possible thing I could think of, I might look a little bit like Charlie standing in front of the whiteboard, like just crashing out and spinning out. But it's probably the best way I can use my time with you tonight. Like in the 3 hours that we had. I don't know, has it been 3 hours? A little more than 3 hours maybe. But in the 3 hours that we had together, I hope you felt challenged in the sense that you didn't know where we were going to go. Or if you did know where we were going to go, I hope you felt tricked in the sense that we went somewhere else. I hope you feel somewhat disappointed that maybe you didn't learn what you thought you would learn. And I hope you feel excited that you learned something maybe you never thought that you would learn. It's a process for me because I'm excited that I didn't know what I was going to say and I said a bunch of things that I didn't even really think about before that feel like new things to me. Like the Buddhist mu thing. The idea of the gift of nothing being a positive something containing all things, being way better than the something that was sought after. One final point of complexity. The no, if we think of it as a mantra, let's analyze it. No is na and a void. We already talked about the void. Let's go to the na now, the no, the na. We know na from Namah Shivaya. It's the first mantra in Namah Shivaya. The first bija, the bijakshara that makes Namah Shivaya. So the first thing Shiva says is no. Because within that void of na comes ma. Ma means to measure, and ma stands for Maya. But Maya here does not mean illusion. Maya here means, as you know, the Swatantriya Shakti of the Lord. Do you see why Paramartha Sara now, in verse 15, explains Maya as the ability to magically display all phenomena, but you cannot magically display any phenomena until you first have the void of no. Na gives you the space for ma. You can only measure and create and destroy and relate and express. You can only shapo, jnanam, sankyam, gatinada, kalanam, kramath. Doesn't this want to make you just like, doesn't this break your heart It's just so beautiful to me that Ma means Maya, and Maya means Lord Shiva's magical power, represented by the serpent. And his magical power gives him lordship, Ishana. And his lordship is not a lordship over a person, nor is it lordship in the sense of control by understanding all the laws of the universe. It's a lordship of relinquishing all control, relinquishing all reason. And in the apocalyptic laughter of that, attahasa, he's laughing apocalyptically because he's just gone mad. Like Lord Shiva is just mad. Mad in the way that poets are mad and artists are mad, in the way that scientists are mad, in the way that mystics are mad. Like there's been this like madness that has been kind of descending upon me that I've been like pushing away because I'm holding on to the knowledge structures that give me some sense of safety. When I enter into a lecture, I feel safe because for 3 hours I can say things that I know how to say, that I've said before, that I know have value. But like if I enter into a lecture and just like pretend that I don't know all of those things, that's when I feel most alive. And I just want to laugh. It feels like a prank. This whole thing feels like a prank. These past 5 years of pretentiously talking about Hinduism and presenting ideas, it's all a prank as it were, and it's feeling more and more like that to me. And it's becoming more and more interesting to me to treat it as a prank and to like prank within the space of the void. So no, na allows for ma. Ma means Maya, everything appears, and then she. She means Shiva or the Guru, and the Guru is one who gives Vak, and the Vak is one who gives Yamala. So Namah Shivaya, when you break it down, is no is the void, na, and in that negation becomes possible Maya, and then Maya then creates a world in which we feel ourselves to be this limited individual, so we approach a Guru. Why approach a Guru at all if you are not seeking transcendence and freedom and liberation? Then what does the Guru do? The Guru gives Vak, and for me, the Vak that I'm interested in is fuck. You know, fuck is my Vak. Because fuck, as it were, is like fucking with you. And what does it fuck? It fucks your idea of what you think is real and true and valuable. It gives you new thoughts. The Guru's job is to give you thoughts that you never thought before in order to realize that what you thought was not the only way to think. You know, by giving you new thoughts, the Guru, the Vak of the Guru, gives you then Yamala. What is the Yamala for? For na. The Yamala, the void in the beginning, is the thing that you enter into at the end of Namah Shivaya. So, the yes is really not a yes to any one particular thing. It's a yes to all things, because the yes to all things is a yes to nothing. So to say yes to the void is the purpose of Shaivism. And when I say Jai Ma, I'm saying victory to the mother. I'm saying Namah Shivaya. I'm saying Naya, Yana, Yana. Yes to no. So if someone says no and I say no to their no, I'm trying to void their void because I want a thing. But if someone says no and I'm happy with that, I'm just like, thank you. Thank you for saying no. That's called Jai Ma. That's called Namah Shivaya. So part of this comes from when I was on a layover, an 8-hour layover, and I was across the table from someone very interesting and very special and very intelligent and very spiritually mature. And she was showing me all of her knives, naturally. She makes tantras, which is so cool. She like writes tantras because she studies Kaula Nirnaya, she studies Kaula Arnava Tantra, and she just composes these beautiful padatis. And her padatis are so refreshing because she just doesn't give a fuck, dude. And the other day I was talking to her and I was like, okay, so I'm coming up with this wonderful like thing with Bhairavanandaji, and oh, watch this. Look at this. I presented something to her. I was like, I just like drafted all night in a like stream of conscious thing, a protocol for Diksha. And I'm like, here are all these things that you should think about before you give someone a mantra. Now, if I can be transparent about my process of giving mantras, why I give the mantras that I give, and how I can like present mantras that I think are actually spiritually nourishing, then if anybody has a problem with me giving mantras, I can just be like, hey, look at my Medium article or something. This is me being transparent, walking you through the process, so you realize it's based, or at least, you know, even if you don't think it's based, there's a reason for it. I'm not just like in my idiosyncratic whimsy playing out a Guru Leela of power and authority and just like wanting to give people mantras because I'm playing Guru. It's not that I don't know what I'm doing. If you want to think about what I'm doing and understand why I'm doing it, there's a Medium article that you can read. So I wrote this thing and I sent it to my friend, and she was just like, dude, what? Like, why do you feel it's necessary to have a Medium article to point people to in order to understand your process in the name of being transparent so that people will know that what you're doing is like fine? She's like, what you're doing is fine because you want to do it and you're doing it, and people that you're doing it with are benefited from it. So like, stop there. don't bother offering explanations to people who need them. You know, so if someone asks, who is your guru? First of all, the burden of proof is not on you to say who your guru is. The burden of proof is on them, as it were, to explain why they need to know who your guru is. If, like, another friend of mine recently told me that somebody asked her if she wanted children, she said no. She left it at that, and they were like, why? And she was like, why do I need to explain to you why I don't want children? In the same way that you don't feel like you need to explain to anyone that you want children, I don't feel like I need to explain to anyone that I don't want children. You know, like, if I say no to somebody who is, making a romantic advance, the burden of proof is not on me to explain why I'm not open to that romantic advance at all. And neither is the burden of proof on them to explain why they made that romantic advance in the first place. That was right to do, and saying no was also right to do, and I'm saying most especially nice to do, because then they're freed. So Namah Shivaya. This whole talk has been a talk about the void, a talk about the infinite possibilities of the void, and really an exegesis on the mantra Na, which opens Namah Shivaya. And so now you've learned Na, as it were. So anyway, coming back to my thing. She's showing me knives, and we're talking about all sorts of things, and we're talking about gematria, Hebrew, Aramaic, linguistic mysticism. And in the Hebrew tradition, there's numbers. In the Sanskrit tradition, we might not be like thinking in that way, but in the Hebrew tradition, you take Aleph, and I don't know much about this, I'm just like saying what she said to me. Aleph is like 22. I knew that, like Aleph has the symbol of 22, and then when you read like a word, like say Malkuth, in the Talmud, you could say, okay, Malkuth means throne, but if we break it down to like Mem and all the various words, then you can explain what Mem means with regards to the number value that it has. So if I take Shin, you could say that means truth maybe, Kof and Resh, you could say maybe mean the back of the head. So if I put Shin with Kof and Resh, I get the word Sheker, and Sheker means conspiracy. So a conspiracy or a lie is a way to distort or subvert or invert truth, but you must start with the truth. A lie only works if it has a shred of truth. So the things about what people say about me on the internet, there's a lot of truth to it, obviously. There must be, and I'm reflecting upon all of those things to be responsible. But there's also a lot of ways in which that truth is exaggerated and taken to very strange places, and it's like now, it's gone into a place where it's like preposterous, ridiculous things are said. But they cannot be said if they didn't point to something that was true. And like Shin, the truth, is the beginning of all conspiracy. And one who knows the truth is most empowered to conspire, because then they have the power to manipulate and distort that truth the way they want. But they must first know the truth. So the people who are manipulating and controlling arguably are wise people who know the truth. They're maybe not that wise because they feel the need to control, but also they've been conditioned to believe that control is good. They are victims, really. The people who are being told yes to are victims. In one sense, it's the white cis male who deserves most of our sympathy, because brown women in general, the LGBTQIA, children, minorities, immigrants, they're the freest, happiest people because all they've ever heard, most of them, is no. I mean, that's a blessing, right? Isn't it a blessing to be a marginalized group? I mean, the Hebrew tradition would say so, as it were. Why are they so desperate then to reconstitute their nation state? Because if they do, the moment they get their temple back, the moment they get Judea back, the entire Hebrew ethos will be lost. Because the Hebrew ethos is based on diaspora, it's based on uncertainty, it's based on trusting God in the middle of the desert where you don't have any of your urban systems to keep you safe. It's almost like Judaism works best as a diaspora tradition. It works best when the rules don't work. And I shouldn't be commenting on Judaism because what the fuck do I know? But my friend was telling me at least this. In the Gentile system of Gematria, you can also engage with things like the tarot. Because in Italy, in the 14th, 15th, especially in the 16th, 17th century, post-Renaissance Italy, you have the tarot. The tarot has now become a widespread tradition, not just for a game, but also for understanding archetypical truths about the universe. So then what you can do is you can take a word, like say a Hebrew word, like Aleph, and then you can say it's number 22, and then map that onto the major arcana. So Aleph then is the world. Anyway, a lot of this conversation was about Yod, the role of the word Yod, because I was thinking it's so similar, Yod, to Yam. The way Abhinavagupta talks about Yam, Ya as the air mantra, it's that which is like flowing and fluid and dynamic, and it goes all over the place. It's like a kind of power that empowers. And so Yod works the same way, where when you write in Hebrew, arguably, the Yod is there to empower the thing. Yod is very special. And when you look at the thing above the Christ, it says I-N-R-I, right? Like Yod, Nun, Resh, Yod. This is embarrassing, but in 2018, I put out a EP. It's called Devotion. I love the cover because it's just me holding a lotus with like a lotus candle holder with a candle in it. And I took a picture of that lotus in my hand in an absolutely dark room. And so everything is black and there's just this hand holding the lotus. And I like the idea of my 5 fingers and the 5 petals of the lotus and the candle within it. And the record was called Devotion. But one of the songs on the record, and it's like horribly recorded because I did the whole thing on GarageBand, and it was like my debut, as it were, in the world of production and mixing and mastering. Like, I can play the guitar like a motherfucker, of course, but I just didn't know how to record. And this was the first time I was like recording for myself. Usually a studio engineer would be there, or like a producer or something. They would handle everything about the mix and about the DAW. But I was like, look, I'm just going to try. I'm going to get on GarageBand. I'm going to record a few things. I'm just going to play around with like panning and whatever. So that was really fun for me because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And now when I think about it, that was my favorite record ever because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And I listened back to it the other day. I'm like, there are things that I'm doing in that record that I wouldn't do now because I know too much. I know better. And that's kind of sad. And so anyway, in that record, there's one song that I like. It's called Corpus Christi. It's about like this flavor of Christ being crucified or whatever. And the song opens with a very embarrassing like attempt at sounding out the Hebrew of INRI. So I'm like, Yod, Nun, Resh, Yod, in a very self-important way. And the song like opens and it's like this metal thing. And it's kind of cool. Like I use a raga that I like, Rag Bhairavi in it. So Yod is the opening mantra, as it were, the opening bija that forms the mantra of Christ. So if the Christ has a mantra, Yod might be the same thing as like Na in Namah Shivaya, the opening sound, Yod. And if Yod is Ya, and if Ya means all pervasive, and if Ya, as I said earlier, relates to Da, Ya, that which gives to everyone, everywhere, all pervasively, isn't that what the Christ is, if nothing else? He's unconditional love incarnate. He treats everyone the same and gives everyone just what they need at that time in their spiritual life to become the best version of themselves. He doesn't preach. The Christ teaches. He doesn't preach. Preachers are very bad because they just tell you what they think and like expect you to believe it. A teacher is not a preacher because they have no agenda, they have nothing to share really, but they have the power to like give you what you need at that time because that's what they want of you. Not for you to like want what they want, but for you to want what you want and then help you to get that. And what do we all want? Arguably freedom. So in the moment you say no, you're giving someone that freedom. And the next mantra is Nun. Yod, Nun, Resh, Yod. So understanding this from a tantric point of view, I'm so sorry. I know this is maybe like a kind of like sacrilegious thing to do, to try to understand a mantra in a different tradition using the logic and understanding of mantra in one tradition. I like to keep things in their proper context, but that's only because we're trying to keep safe. And let's like not be safe for a little bit. And let me just say, if we take Yod, Nun, Resh, Yod in the tantric sense, you get air, you get the Na, which we talked about, the void, you get fire, Ra, Ram, and you get, again, air. So there's an air in the beginning, air in the end. It's almost like God is the Yod in the beginning, God is the Yod in the end. And for you to get that Yod in the end, you must go through void and fire. So Nun is the void, Ra is fire, and through fire and void you step. This sounds like a good metal song already. Through void and fire you step and you come out purified, Osiris risen. But Osiris must first be slain and dismembered for him to then be risen. And in another song I'm like, glorified by suffering, purified by trial. Or Cyrus is risen, standing in the Whole Foods aisle. You know, the idea of something so mundane, like we're in a grocery store and you're seeing somebody standing in the grocery store and you see them as a fully perfected being. Why? Because they've been broken and dismembered, and this whole like solve et coagula kind of idea. It's like they've been reconstituted from having been broken down to the primary principles, and staying broken, they can be reconstituted again and again and again in a variety of different forms. But the moment they ossify into one form, the moment your love takes a limitation like this, when you love somebody, you think it's about that form, you're ossified. And when that person says no, the greatest possible gift was given because that form has now been dissolved through void. And through void comes the fire, the trial of realizing I now have to face all these other possibilities that I didn't plan for, that I'm afraid of. The sheer like diversity of it is scary. And if you can handle that fire, if you can be properly cooked, then you come out Yod, free. So Yod, I was talking to my friend about Yod and its relation to Yam, and then she told me, look at Nun. Do you know what Nun means? It means the primordial ocean of creation. And that's an Egyptian understanding. Nun in the Egyptian is this primordial ocean. You could say Mem or something. You can like argue that in the Hebrew tradition. You have Mara. You have different ways of understanding ocean. But in the Egyptian sense, Nun is the primordial ocean of creation. And like Tefnut or some deity like that, I think he nuts, right? He like ejaculates or he spits or he does something. And then he sculpts the oceans of creation into like a solid structure. So you take chaos and potential and void and you turn it into a particular form. That's Daksha's Yagya. And Shaivism comes, or Kali comes, and then she destroys that form and you don't like it, but she likes it because you actually deep down inside really like it. She likes it because you like it, because you're non-different from her, but you don't know that you like it, and so her job is to give you what you want, but maybe not what you thought you wanted. And not really what you needed either. It's what you want. You want freedom, and you think that this possibility will increase your freedom. Far from it. If you get what you wanted, it will bind you more. If you don't get what you wanted, you now get what you really wanted, which is the freedom to want, and now you can want infinitely. So she was explaining this to me. Nun means primordial oceans of creation. Already you can see the link there between that idea and this lecture that I gave. But then she goes further and she says, and Nun means 15 or something. She like did the gematria for me. I don't know if Nun is 15 or like Na plus the other one makes 15. But she got 15. She's like, now look at the major arcana. What card is the 15th card of the major arcana? Does anybody want to hazard a guess? What do you think? The major arcana being the, I'm thinking the Rider Smith, the Waite Smith deck, right? Like, no, magician's 1. So there's a fool, there's the magician, yeah, the devil. 15 is the devil. And you know what happens when you say no? You become the devil. Like, you're demonized for saying no. If a woman says no, Jezebel, devil, like, you're just like made to feel really bad about saying no. And if a child says no, naughty, stand in the corner. Yeah, but nobody puts baby in the motherfucking corner, especially if that baby is Batuka Bhairava, motherfucker. Like, they keep trying to put baby in the corner. They keep trying to send Ophelia to a nunnery for being hysterical or unreasonable. Fitzgerald, like, committed his wife to an asylum because she was acting out. And what does acting out mean? Fucking speaking out. And what does speaking out mean? Fucking speaking. And what kind of speech do we not want women to, like, use? The speech that affirms their own sovereignty, allows for them to make choices other than what we thought they would make. So parents, especially Indian parents, oh my god, Asian parents, but all parents hate it when their daughters do something other than what they thought their daughter should do. The daughter takes a different lifestyle path and they're freaking out. The daughter gets a tattoo or like gets a piercing and that's other than what they expect the daughter to be in that culture, and they're demonized. So many kids, especially in like households where their parents are very controlling, feel bad for expressing themselves, because usually what it means to express yourself is to do something that has never been done before. And that's why I love the way a child approaches art or a child approaches the world, because they're not conditioned enough to do what is expected of them, and they do the wrong thing, and how quickly they are conditioned out of it. Women, children, minorities, especially model minorities, we're doing so much to just assuage those people whose approval and acceptance we think we need. So my friend on the phone the other night, she just did everything she could to make her partner feel comfortable and safe. But that was doing him a disservice. So she told me a beautiful story. I don't think she'll mind me sharing it. I won't say her name. She was sitting to do her Kali sadhana. And she had never before spoken this way to her partner. But while she was doing her Kali sadhana, weirdly enough, she started making noises. Not that she meant to. She just started like spontaneously groaning or sighing, but in a very soft way. It wasn't like, ah, it was just like kind of, ah. She even showed me what sounds she was making. So unobtrusive. But weirdly enough, her partner comes into the room and taps her on the shoulder and kind of asks her not to make those sounds. And that's probably what every woman and every child and every minority and every artist feels when they start expressing something that is inconvenient by virtue of being different. It's just not what we do. It's just not what is done. It's not what is expected of us. And now you're doing that. No. That just won't do. So the person comes and taps her shoulder, try to get her to stop making those sounds. And in that moment, she suddenly felt an anger that she had never felt before. And she turned around and snapped at him, "You will not speak to me that way again." And she immediately was like, oh my god, what did I just say? And I think that was an Avesha moment. Like, there was Kali coming through her, finally for the first time maybe in a long time, asserting that she will not be made to do something she otherwise doesn't want to do. She was saying no. He was like, can you be quiet? And she was like, fuck no. And you can fuck off. You know, either you're going to be okay with me sighing in my puja, or you're not. And if you're not, then I'm not going to stop sighing in my puja. You're going to have to leave the motherfucking house. And it's so funny because until this happened, I don't think my friend was ready to leave that relationship. But then that happened, and then on the call, she was finally, she was obviously it's going to be a lot of grief. right? It's going to be grief because she's losing a person that she loves very much and cares about very much and feels very safe around, who she considers to be her spiritual partner, with whom she shared some major key spiritual experiences. And she always expected that they would live their whole lives together as spiritual partners, pursuing the truth together. It's like her person, her world. But when that person, in the context of Kali Puja, tapped her shoulder and told her to stop making sounds, that was when something awoke in her that made it possible for her now to walk away from the relationship. And that's why I was thinking the gift that Ma Kali gives is most felt by minorities, whether they're sexual minorities or racial minorities or physical minorities. It's most felt by neurodivergent people, maybe. It's most felt by artists and mystics. It's most felt by women. And who will benefit from this? The cis white male. I think this is the person who is really the victim of all of these things. We should not be angry at that person for doing what he did. You know, it's like, it's so scary to be confronted with something that is unpredictable, and it's like, who can be upset at someone who doesn't want to face the void, who doesn't want to be thrown into an abyss? It's not their fault, but it is our responsibility. Do you see? It is our responsibility to free them from their shackles. And that's what the devil does. He frees you, as it were, by freeing you from the tyranny of a God of reason, justice, law, and order. God gives you rules. The devil tells you you can break them. And that's why jazz music has always been associated to the devil. And classical musicians too. There have been great classical musicians who have done things in classical music that the system did not allow. And therefore, they were demonized, and their music was called like gypsy music, you know, Romani music, in the sense that it's like Eastern music, and that's like a understanding of music that isn't our Western, like clean and ordered and elegant understanding. You're breaking the rules, and so you're of the devil. And so Bach and all these wonderful composers, they were revolutionaries, and in their time, they were like the jazz musicians. They were the bad boys on the scene, as it were. And the bad girls, we never even heard about them. You know, maybe because they were all conditioned to say yes when their piano teachers told them that was the wrong note to play. The boys, maybe they had a little bit more of an ability to say no. The piano teacher said, no, that's the wrong note to play, and they're like, no, I'm going to play it anyway, because the boy might be conditioned differently in this way, especially when you're Mozart and you're in a very like rich and aristocratic family whose father is also a respected musician. Maybe you have a little more courage to be like, no, fuck it, I can do this. But even then they're demonized. Sometimes they're burned at the stake, sometimes they're put under house arrest, sometimes they're kicked out of the church, and their name is smeared everywhere. They become the villains. And so all the villains that I know in this world, people that have been villainized by culture, I've started to be like more interested in. Okay, this is where like people will freak out. It's like, oh my god, he's villain maxing right now. He's gonna go on his villain arc. Maybe like all of these fears about him are ultimately going to be true. Yeah, fuck, maybe. I don't know. I just think there's like value to the bad, evil, liminal figure called the devil, because especially when you consider that the devil was how people would, in the early Christian period, in the first 300 years of Christianity, would eject from their tradition those things that didn't match the popular way of thinking about things. So if you thought about the Bible differently from what we think, if you didn't pass the test, if you weren't standardized, if you didn't wear the uniform, if you dressed in your own way and thought in your own way and spoke about things that like are idiosyncratic or at least alternative, then your God is the devil. So Marcion's God of love in the New Testament, which he distinguishes from the God of rules and regulation in the Old Testament, is really a God of freedom. Because the Old Testament God is a God of covenants, a God of rules. And that's why like the family structure doesn't really do well in the Kali sadhana. Because the family structure makes sense because we're saying we're reasonably meant to do good things to one another and look out for one another because of biology. It's an obligation, you see. It's a covenant. It's a covenant of blood. But the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, you see. And so the whole Christian tradition starts with the fact that that's not even a covenant that you should observe. If you want to, you can, but you didn't like volunteer for it. You didn't consent to it. So you were born into a family, arguably, you didn't consent to be born into. And you know, we don't have to talk about like karma and how this is like the best thing for you to work out. But maybe like the thing that you need to do in the family that you're in is to kind of walk away when it's time to walk away. Maybe that was the karma that you had to learn. Maybe it was good to be born gay and be told by Christian conservative parents that it was wrong to be gay. Thank God you were born to Christian conservative parents who told you that it was wrong to be gay, because then you learned the power of no, right? So the covenant is a problem because it forces you to say yes because you made a covenant, because you made a pact. It's an obligation. Swami Vivekananda calls this the scorching noonday sun. Obligation, duty, it's horrible. It's a scorching noonday sun. If you had no duties, if you just like tomorrow, just for fun, what if tomorrow You just said no to all of your obligations. Wouldn't it be scary? How would that make you feel? You might feel guilty, you might feel ashamed, you let some people down. My experiment for you is just to say no to everything tomorrow. Do you know, like put on that Bruno Mars song or something. Today I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna lay in my bed. Don't feel like picking up my phone, so leave a message after the tone. Because today I don't feel like doing anything. Nothing at all. How freeing is that? Nothing is so freeing. If I do nothing all day, I can do anything all day. Would it scare you tomorrow to just like not have a plan or a program? You know, I've shown up to many retreats and they're like, what's the program? What's the schedule? I'm like, there is none. And they're like, oh, then when will we organize the meals? I'm like, I don't know, we'll eat when we're hungry. Like, where will people sleep? I don't know, they'll find a patch of floor, they'll work out a situation with the rooms. Like, I suck at logistics because I suck at planning because I just won't play that game. I'm saying no. I'm saying no to the planning. I'm saying no to the logistics. I'm saying, even when I show up for a lecture and there's a title for the lecture, I'm saying no to that title. I'm saying no to like a time constraint. It's like improvising. I love improvising. And what if you improvise tomorrow? Just like think about all the things that you have to do tomorrow. Maybe like it would really suck that you don't pick up your kid from football practice. I don't know. Maybe that could be the best thing for the kid. What if you just didn't pick up your kid from football practice? Oh my god, it's kind of crazy all the things that I'm saying right now. But I don't know, maybe the kid will be kidnapped and like ritually dismembered by Satanists. I don't know, it'd be horrible if that happened. Protect your kids from that. But maybe they would like make a new friend. Maybe they would talk to their teachers. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the kid would like be scared and feel neglected and feel abandoned, and maybe that will be valuable. I don't know, that's an extreme example. Probably you should pick up your kid, okay? Probably you should pick up your kid from football practice. But maybe you told a friend that you would meet them for tea tomorrow, and maybe like you just say no. What if you just said no? Would that be so bad? Would it be so shameful? Would you feel guilty about it? You know, that's the experiment of no. And women especially, if you can say no, you should start to reframe that as the gift that you're giving your partner, who is used to being told yes, the possibility to confront their own creative power, their own Maya Shakti, their own Swatantra, because you free them now to explore all the other possibilities, which is not the one that they thought that they were going to get with you. So no then becomes the responsibility of all minorities, of all women. Like the devil is no. And I think we have to embrace being the devil. And look how much Lord Shiva has been demonized. Kali is called demonic. We had somebody scream Satanism at us. And that means maybe we're on the right track. I don't know. It's not necessarily the case that if everybody's angry at you, you're on the right track, but I might just go so far today as to say, everybody is angry at us. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. We're doing something new, something different. And if they're angry at us, it's only a testament to the fact that we're freeing them from the construct of what they thought should happen or what they thought it should look like. So that's all I really wanted to say. And with regards to the dazzling, dizzying diversity of the tantric tradition, I'm going to put a list together. I'm trying to make it make sense, and it's broken me in the best possible way. I tried to systematize tantra in a new way, the way Abhinavagupta might have tried in the Tantra Loka, and I just fucking failed. This past 3 days, I've been up all night, 3 days, just working at this incessantly with Bhairavananda, like writing, going to this book and that book, like trying to make connections that would make sense to someone, trying to teach the underlying unity and unifying power of the Sanskrit language. I'm just like, oh fuck, it really doesn't make sense. And thank God, because I asked Tantra to make sense and she said, no, motherfucker. And I'm like, thank you. So now, last thing I swear, if you confront a document, I'll put out a document maybe, and if you confront a document, it's like full of stuff that you don't understand. Maybe it's a puja vidhi, like a ritual manual that is full of mantras you don't really understand and full of like techniques that you don't really understand. The very fact that you're seeing it is important, right? Now, when I put the document out with all the various like sources, primary and secondary, across the tradition, starting with the Pashupata Sutra of Kaundinya, which is one of the first works from the 5th century, if I map out like what, 5th century, 500 years, plus like what's 2000 now, so like 1,500 years of text. If I put in front of you 1,500 years of text that have just appeared within Shaivism and Shaktism, what to say of all of India, if I put all of these things in front of you, what will you do? There's one way to really misunderstand my lecture right now. You know how you could misunderstand my lecture? If you heard the Bruno Mars song and you freed up your day tomorrow and you didn't do anything. Like, no, the point was not to not do anything. The point was to be available for everything. And so therefore you go through with some of those possibilities. So if you had nothing planned tomorrow, then you could be open to an invitation to go and get tea, and you should go and get tea if you want to. And then when you're at tea, your friend might be like, didn't we plan to go see a movie at some point? Maybe we should do that now. And you're like, nah, I don't really want to do that. And then just sit at the tea store or whatever, tea store. I'm definitely losing it. Cafe. You just sit at the cafe. You don't do anything. No, like obviously you do the next thing. It's a dynamic sort of nothing that I'm presenting here, right? That means if what you got from this lecture is I shouldn't try, if it's like, oh, I'm just not gonna, like this would be the wrong conclusion for me. Oh my God, I can't understand it, therefore I should stop trying. No, the very opposite thing is going to happen. Because I can't understand it, I'm going to now attempt it with even more gusto, because it allows me to explore all the possibilities which is available now in the void of my understanding. That means when I present the document, you look at it, it's an invitation to engage with it, even if in the beginning engaging with it seems really intimidating. So what it looks like then to learn Tantra, to study Sanskrit, to understand Sanskrit on the level of nuance that I've been talking about in the beginning of the class, what it means to interact with the primary and secondary sources, most of them in Sanskrit, which are a dazzling, dizzying display of things, what it means to interact with all the diversity of instruction and teachers and expressions, is to embrace the full spectrum of that diversity. So to offer you as many possibilities as possible, that's going to be my goal. To put in front of you as many ideas and as many like invitations and as many texts as possible, that's my goal. And then once that's in front of you, plunge into it. And no one can tell you how. No one can tell you which text to start with. No one can tell you how to learn Sanskrit. And that was the problem that Bhairavananda ji and I were having with most of the ways that people are teaching Sanskrit. It's too structured. And because it's structured, we miss out on the multivalence that a dhatu can have, on the rich phonemic power that the bijaksharas can have when understood in their independent context. So Nun, the primordial ocean, Na in the Namah Shivaya, No, which is most powerful when it comes from a woman, when it comes from a marginalized woman, when it comes from a minority. Let us now be initiated by the grace of the void, Kali, into this mantra of No. And especially as women, let us reclaim the power of an inexplicable, No. And maybe this is my life's work. I'm just not, everybody's name is a mantra, as it were. And it's like your name might be your mission, as it were, if you understand it mantrically. So my name is Nishanta Nata, as you know, right? So Nishanta, I've always understood it to be the end of night. But recently I discovered that the end of night is not necessarily the dawn. The end of night is the morning star. And that made me really excited. I mean, of course, it's really edgy and goth and cool to be like, oh, Nishantanata means the end of night, or the essence of night or whatever. But it means like dawn, but really it means morning star, which is Lucifer. So I'm like, oh, cool. So like that's really nice, because then I can like reclaim my role as like a provocateur, if you will, for lack of a better word. But then if I break it down to its mantric components, I realize there's so many N's in my name. Like the N, the Na sound is very like pervasive in my name. And of course that allowed me to connect to Shaivism really easily, because there's so many mantras in Shaivism for whom Na is the central sound. So Namah Shivaya works really nicely in this energetic body, because it's already aligned with the mantra that I am, that I was given at birth. So Nishanta Nata is the name and the mantra, the energetic frequency that expresses itself as this. But what I really struggle with in my life, I realize, is saying no. I have the mercurial flexibility of mind to reason everything out and make sense of everything and hold so many facts all together in my mind at the same time and think spatially. One reason why it's so easy for me to go on tangents is because I can see the whole conversation in my mind. And if we've been talking for 2 hours and we go on a tangent, it's easy for me to retrace my steps and see where we started 2 hours ago, because all of that is appearing to me in my mind space spatially. Yeah, this is my special interest. You can see there's like some neurodivergence here. But like I'm seeing in my mind space all of these points, like visualizing the conversation. Yeah, like I can hold it in the canvas of our conversation and I can see all of these things. That's a blessing, but also, I mean, it's a wonderful blessing. It's beautiful. It's made my life so wonderful. But it's also a curse in the sense that when I can map everything out, the things that most interest me are those things that stick out of that map, that don't make sense in the context of that whole map. And so I've been craving the thing that fucks with my understanding my whole time. And that's why I love unpredictable people. My dating history is nothing but dating unpredictable people that are unsafe for me in one sense, because they're freeing me from the tyranny of my expectation. I date a lot of women who are really good at not managing my expectations and really good at like not meeting them. And that's the gift that every relationship that I've ever had has given me. Do you know, it's like the breakup, it's the no, it's the yes when you expected a no, it's the sudden and spontaneous change of plans. These are the things that I've learned most from my relationships. And I'm thinking like this is my life's work, to like learn to say no, but also maybe to understand the power of no and to be a living testament to no. That's maybe why we value defiance and rebellion as much as we have. And maybe it doesn't matter what you defy or what you rebel. Maybe it's enough to defy, it's enough to rebel. And in so doing, we reclaim our power. So this is my offering to no. Will we say any more? No. Om.